I had my eyes on him for 4 weeks and he has not looked at me once because he's a coward, and that's exactly what he is.
Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Welcome back to CASE Documentaries. I bring you true crime, disturbing stories and other things that you may later regret knowing with regular uploads every week. Please do join the quickly growing, incredibly supportive CASE family by hitting subscribe now and turning on notifications. Thank you so much to all of my patrons. If your name is on screen right now, then you're a legend. Our love and respect goes out to all those that knew and loved Ellie and all those affected by this dark case. Ellie Marlene Edwards was born on May 10th, 1996 in New Brighton. New Brighton is a peaceful community known for its vibrant beachfront and welcoming atmosphere. She was a popular beautician and a dental nurse. Ellie was described by her father as radiant. She had the kind of smile that could brighten any room and any day. She also had a habit of offering warm embraces and checking up on people. Her hugs had the power to uplift even the gloomiest of days. Her infectious laughter guaranteed that anyone in her company would have a good time, and she embraced life with enthusiasm and positivity. She had a lot of dreams that she pursued, and she was on the cusp of making them all come true, basking in the happiest phase of her life. With a magnetic personality, she had an ability to make people fall in love with her upon first meeting. On December 24th, 2022, 26-year-old Ellie Edwards was celebrating Christmas Eve with her sister and friends at the Lighthouse Inn in Wallasey Village, Merseyside. During Christmas, Wallasey Village comes alive with the spirit of the season. The town's strong sense of tradition and community makes it a particularly special place at this time of year. Locals and visitors alike join in the spirit of the season, dancing, singing, and sharing in the joy of the holiday. On that evening, Lucy Edwards, her sister and her friends were in high spirits, singing along to the Christmas classics inside the pub. Just before midnight, Ellie went outside for a cigarette. While the rest of her group were at the bar getting drinks, they suddenly heard loud bangs. Initially, everyone thought they were fireworks. Not the most unusual thing to hear on Christmas Eve. However, in mere moments, Ellie collapsed on the floor. Jess, a friend of Ellie, recalled that everything happened in a blur. She and the rest of Ellie's friends wished they could have done more, but they soon realised there was nothing else to be done. A woman tried to perform CPR on Ellie as she lay breathless, but it was in vain. Heartbreaking footage captured her final moments, showing her warmly greeting friends with hugs and a radiant smile. Despite efforts to save her, she was pronounced dead on Christmas Day at Arrow Park Hospital. The stark contrast from one moment to the next is almost unimaginable. Ellie Edwards was formally identified by her father, Tim Edwards. The post-mortem examination revealed the extent of Ellie Edwards' injuries which were very clearly non-survivable. She had been struck twice in the back of her head. One projectile passed through her skull and brain, exiting just above her right eye, while the second projectile pierced her skull and entered her brain. All necessary pathological examinations had been completed. This allowed Ellie's body to be released to her family so they could make arrangements for her funeral. The funeral was held on January 25th, 2023 at St Nicholas Church in Wallasey. Hundreds of people laid flowers and watched the funeral procession pass through the streets. The service was attended by those close to Ellie. And all of this because on Christmas Eve, a day that was supposed to be filled with joy and happiness, an innocent life was taken in front of hundreds of happy people. It was later discovered that Ellie Edwards was simply at the wrong place at the wrong time. A mixed DNA profile was found on a bullet casing recovered at the scene. Additionally, this same DNA was detected on a glove recovered at someone's house. and this glove matched the red gloves worn by the gunman as captured on CCTV from the Lighthouse pub. The DNA belonged to none other than 23-year-old Connor Chapman. He was later tracked down and arrested whilst at Tesco's in Newtown. This is that footage. In fact, the day that he shot Ellie marks the first Christmas in 5 years that Connor Chapman had not been behind bars. Chapman was raised in Birkenhead's rugged Woodchurch estate. He was a persistent troublemaker from his early teenage years. By the time he was 14, he had already appeared in courts for shoplifting, and at just 15, his criminal record included convictions for offences such as burglary, assault, and possession of an offensive firearm. His social media presence from that period was littered with scarcely legible complaints. Complaints about having to wear an ankle monitor, also known as a tag. On his 15th birthday, Chapman posted, "Proper devoed," short for devastated, "am on tag, would have rather add messy one, will, or with, the lads." 2 months later, he wrote, "4 days left on this tag." A friend of his cautioned him, "You just behave yourself when it's gone, young man." But, of course, Connor Chapman did anything but. On that fateful day, Chapman had lurked outside the pub in Wallasey Village. He laid in wait for nearly 3 hours before using a military-grade weapon, a weapon capable of firing 15 rounds per second. During the trial, a video was presented that depicted the horrifying events. In the video, it was evident that 5 men and Ellie were injured when Connor Chapman opened fire with this Scorpion submachine gun. After the attack, Chapman fled the scene in a stolen black Mercedes A-Class. He eventually reached the residence of Thomas Waring in Barnston. Waring was born on September 30th, 2002, and at the time of the offence, he was just 20 years old. Waring then arranged for a taxi to transport Chapman, and this taxi allegedly took him back to his home in Woodchurch. The shooting was a culmination of a series of retaliatory actions between rival groups, different gangs from the Woodchurch and Ford estates situated on opposite sides of the M53 in Wirral. These confrontations included assaults, burglaries, and previous shootings. The jury learned that Chapman, who lived on Houghton Road in Woodchurch, wanted to take the lives of 2 of the men injured in the shooting. The men were Kieran Salkeld and Jake Duffy, both from the Beechwood area. Salkeld and Duffy were from a rival gang who had assaulted Chapman's associate, a man named Sam Searson, just the day before. This is the video from that assault, but I can't really show you it. Both Duffy and Salkeld suffered serious injuries in the shooting. The 3 other men injured in the attack were not connected to the feud at all, just like Ellie. Nigel Power, KC, the prosecutor, revealed that Connor Chapman had recorded a rap video whilst in custody the previous year. He was inside following an aggravated burglary at his mother's residence. In the video, he said, "If I make it out of here, I'm due to become famous because if you touch one of mine, I'll leave your soul on the pavement." He also said, "I know I've been a scumbag, but I'm proud of that." During the trial, Connor Chapman firmly denied being the shooter, but a combination of CCTV footage and evidence from mobile phone cell towers was presented to confirm his role in the attack. He faced a series of convictions related to the tragic events surrounding Ellie Edwards. He was found guilty of Ellie's murder. This was as well as the attempted murder of Kieran Salkeld and Jake Duffy, and wounding with the intent to cause grievous bodily harm against the other men injured in the attack. He was also convicted of assaulting another man, which resulted in actual bodily harm. He also faced charges of possession of a firearm and possession of ammunition with the intent to endanger life. This was specifically concerning the Scorpion submachine gun. He had also pleaded guilty to 1 count of handling stolen goods. This was in relation to the stolen Mercedes used during the incident. During the sentencing, the judge addressed Connor Chapman and Thomas Waring. He said, "You, Chapman, were very actively involved in the Woodchurch gang, while you, Waring, were associated with it. The violence within this feud included shootings and generated significant concerns for the people of Merseyside. On December the 23rd last year, one of your associates was attacked by Kieran Solkeld and Jake Duffy, and you decided to seek revenge. The judge then described how Chapman prepared for the act of violence. He wore dark clothes, a mask and gloves, and avoided the security cameras in the neighborhood. He then said, "You waited for almost 3 hours in the car park, close to the front door where you hid inside your stolen car, waiting for your moment. Just before midnight, you burst forward to fire the submachine gun. Ellie Edwards lost her life instantly, and you injured 5 others. Any of them could have easily lost their lives as well." Connor Chapman received a life sentence with a minimum of 22 years each for the attempted murders of Kieran Solkeld and Jake Duffy. These sentences will run concurrently with the 48-year minimum term for the murder of Ellie Edwards. This results in a total minimum sentence of 48 years. Chapman has 2 children, one of whom he has never met. These children will be middle-aged by the time he is potentially released. As Chapman was led away from the courtroom, Tim Edwards, Ellie's father, maintained a steadfast gaze on him in the dock. The judge concluded proceedings and Chapman was then escorted to the cells. An emotional outburst was heard from Ellie's family members in the public gallery. They expressed anger and disgust directed towards Chapman as they said, "See you later," and "scumbag," although being a scumbag seems to be something he was proud of. His co-defendant Thomas Waring was sentenced to 9 years in prison for possessing a prohibited weapon and for assisting an offender. His assistance included helping to burn out the stolen Mercedes, the car used in the commission of the murder. Regarding the charges of possession of a prohibited weapon, a crime which carries a maximum sentence of 10 years, the judge referred to the 5-year minimum term that applies due to the nature of this offence. He argued that there was no reason to disapply this minimum term. This was given the high culpability because of the way Waring possessed a firearm. He essentially helped Connor Chapman avoid detection. The judge also addressed the charge of assisting an offender. This has a starting range of 6 to 8 years with a maximum of 10 years. This charge was related to the involvement in burning the car used in the attack. The judge noted that Waring had failed to comply with a disclosure notice, a charge to which he had admitted. He emphasized the seriousness of this offence, as it was an attempt to obstruct the investigation into Ellie Edwards' murder. Ellie lost her life due to Waring and Chapman's vengeful actions, and her family will never fully come to terms with this devastating tragedy. Her grandmother, Susan Edwards, expressed in her impact statement that Ellie was very, very special to her and she had been her best friend. She lamented, "If I were to die tomorrow, the coroner would write on my certificate, cause of death. She died of a broken heart." She emphasized how much she misses her angel princess. Connor Edwards, Ellie's older brother, also spoke about his sister during the proceedings. He understandably found it incredibly difficult to talk about her. Ellie was planning to cook Christmas dinner for the first time with their mother. When they spoke on the night that her life was taken, Ellie said that she was with a friend, and Connor wished her a good night. He shared that they had many happy memories growing up, even though they had typical sibling arguments. Ellie had a way of making people feel good about themselves. Connor mentioned that he has a young son who always asks about Ellie. When he sees pictures of her, he points to the sky. He describes how their family is struggling with Ellie's absence. Their mother especially is heartbroken. Ellie and her mother had a very special relationship, and Ellie was always there to help. She was a fun, caring person who brought happiness to everyone she met. On the night of the shooting, Connor woke up to terrible news. He went to their parents' house and had to tell his dad that Ellie had been struck in the head. When they reached the hospital, they learned that Ellie had already passed away. In that moment, their lives were shattered. Despite the tragedy, Connor had to put on a happy face for his son on Christmas Day. He says that Ellie didn't deserve what happened to her. Every day he goes to bed and wakes up feeling the pain of losing his sister. Christmas was always a special time for their family. They always spent it together. Losing Ellie during the holidays was incredibly difficult. However, the family remained strong and united. Brother Connor concluded by saying he loves and misses Ellie, and he will cherish the 26 years that they had together.
Hurry up, please. Hello.
Christina Abbots was born on May 25, 1989 in the West Midlands. She later moved to London and was described as loving, caring, and a loyal family member and friend. She was described by her family as petite, happy, and well educated. Her educational journey took her to the Royal Agricultural College in Cirencester, and then later to Oxford Brookes University. She presented herself as an IT consultant in the city. In truth, however, she maintained a secret identity as an escort. She operated under the alias Tilly Pexton, charging a staggering £2,000 per session. Her services were advertised online, and she met clients in upscale London hotels, as well as a rented flat in Crawley in West Sussex. Friend Howard Joseph, an airline pilot, described Christina as a sociable and personable woman, someone who embraced life to the fullest. She was often travelling, drinking, and partying. Her job allowed her to socialise with a wealthy circle of friends, indulging in high-end experiences like fine dining, and attending high-end events such as Royal Ascot and polo matches. Christina's parents remained unaware of their daughter's actual profession, but they did know about her association with an upper-class social set and about her frequent travels. At one point in her career, Christina Abbots crossed paths with Zahid Nassim. He was an employee of the Toronto Dominion Bank through an online platform. Nassim met Abbots on 3 occasions over a 6-week period. This was usually in hotels and restaurants in London. Nassim would pay her approximately £3,500 each time. He described their relationship as commercial but very intimate. He also gave approximately £2,000 to the friend for whom Abbots was house-sitting, and he actively looked for websites so he could rate her performance as an escort. In one conversation with a friend, he said, "Luckily, I'm here to protect her from harm and the sick perverts out there. I don't want to break her." Hailing from Amersham, Buckinghamshire, Nassim began hiring escorts when his once thriving relationship with his partner eventually lost its spark and they drifted apart. Despite maintaining a successful career, Nassim was fired from his last job at Aberdeen Asset Management due to a substantial £20,000 entertaining expense. Nassim, a father of 2, despite his £250,000 salary, somehow had amassed significant debts. For nearly a decade, he frequently paid for escorts. He indulged in near-daily drinking, and he was a user of stimulants. Nassim attributed his high-stress job, which had taken him to New York whilst working for Merrill Lynch, as the source of his stress. It was on one of those stressful days when he decided to text Christina. On her birthday, May 25th, Christina had arranged for a celebration with friends at the Park Plaza Hotel. This was situated at County Hall in London. However, on the eve of her birthday, she got a text from Nassim who asked to meet her. So, on the evening of May 24th, Nassim met Christina in Crawley, West Sussex, and they went on to spend the night together. After taking a taxi from his Amersham residence, the two were captured in an Asda supermarket aisle. There, Nassim was seen kissing her on the forehead. In the shop, they bought her favourite brand of champagne, Veuve Clicquot. Only a few hours later, he messaged his estranged partner, Helen Jarvis, with the words, "It's too late. I'm sorry. Life isn't going to work out for me." Helen's immediate response was, "What have you done?" She attempted to call him but received no answer. The following day, Christina received birthday wishes from friends and family via text message. However, strangely, she did not respond to any of them. She also did not make an appearance at her own party, an event she was very much looking forward to. Growing concerned, her friend Roshan drove from London to her apartment at 11 p.m. When he couldn't get a response at the door, he called the police.
Thank you. There's someone else here. Yeah, there's someone else in here. Berkey, got another person in here.
Another person in it?
Another person in here.
Is it breathing? No. Knife over. You're whiskey 01. There's one section to see in the building.
There's a knife on there, like joint.
Hang on, his eyes are flickering. What? No. His eyes are flickering. Hello? 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 I think it's the bulb in the light, mate. No,
His eyes are flickering.
Ambulance, please. Ambulance on the...
What do you want me to do with that? Because obviously...
It's fine, leave it where it is.
Mate, can you hear me?
On the hurry up, please.
Hello? Open your eyes to me.
2 officers promptly arrived and then forced their way into the top floor apartment at 2:30 a.m. Christina's friend, waiting downstairs, sensed the gravity of the situation from the expressions on the officers' faces. They found Christina's lifeless body inside the flat. In addition, Naseem was discovered in the living room, seemingly unconscious. He was wearing only a dressing gown. Surrounding him were partially consumed glasses of alcohol. This was along with illicit substance-related paraphernalia.
Hello, mate. Did it go over his hairway? Fantastic.
I tried to get him to like wiggle his fingers or his toes or any part of his body, but obviously no response. Flickering. That's how we actually thought he was deceased initially, but on putting torchlight on his eyes, they were flickering.
Come on, mate, you can hear me. Wakey! Come on, you can hear me, I know you can hear me.
Yeah.
I need to give you... GCS is 7, isn't it? Yeah. Because 1, 1 and 5. But eyes are occasionally open. Because of the circumstances leading to you being here at the hospital, okay, you are at this time under arrest on suspicion of murder. Okay, you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later on in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence.
At first, paramedics suspected Naseem of play acting, but he regained consciousness after being transported to the hospital. Later, during a police interview, he claimed to have no recollection of what had happened with Christina Abbas.
Did you at any time think to call for help?
I did.
Tell me about that.
I did, and I was just, well, what the hell happens next?
Sorry, Zaid, when you say you did...
No, I said I did think about it.
Okay.
And then I thought, well, what the hell's going to happen next? I can't see anything positive coming out of any of this.
Did it not cross your mind that they, ambulance may have been able to assist her, or...?
I don't think she was alive.
Right, okay. And without putting word, did you not panic and think, I need to phone the police? Something's obviously happened.
I did, but I just don't know. I just don't know. I just couldn't see what was going to happen that was going to change anything.
Were you panicking at that time?
I think I was just too much coming in minds at once.
It was what, sorry?
Just too many thoughts in my mind at once.
Mm. Okay. Did you actually phone anybody at all?
I can't remember.
Is that you can't remember, but you possibly may have done?
I don't know. I can't remember.
And if you did, then who would you have phoned? Who would you likely to have phoned?
No one. I don't think I would have phoned anyone.
Okay.
I don't think I was in a state to phone anyone.
Okay.
So just to take that in, there's 13 blows
I got this.
to the head. What do you have to say about that?
I think I'm just shocked. That's what I've got to say about it.
Can you tell us how she came to suffer those injuries?
No, I just don't know. That's why I'm shocked. There was no fight. There was no. I don't know. I just don't know.
My interpretation of this is that that would have been a repeated and prolonged attack. To have suffered 13 separate blows to the head. Help us out with it. So how has this come about?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
You know, I'm sure you spent quite a lot of time whilst you've been here in custody thinking about things and trying to think back.
I'm trying to piece together that night, and I can't piece it together. I just can't piece it. There is no frame of reference to piece it together.
I mean, you've told Mike and I that nobody else entered the flat. The door was double locked with the key left inside.
Mm.
So that leaves you, Saeed.
It's not me. I'm not that person. I don't remember hitting. I don't remember strangling. I don't remember any of that.
So if you had such a good relationship, then why didn't you even think about trying to get her help? Why didn't you even think about trying to call an ambulance for her?
I don't know. I don't know. Do I wish it was Thursday afternoon again? Yes, I wish it was Thursday afternoon again. Do I wish I'd never come to her flat? Yes, I do. I can't turn the clock back. I can't change things. But do I wish any of this outcome? No. It's 2 lives ruined, and many others as well, probably.
He said he was not some hyper high-functioning psychopath, trying to make up a story like it was something from Silence of the Lambs. I'm just telling you what happened or what didn't happen. I can't tell you more than that, he said. Nassim also said that he had never been violent, but he did admit to experiencing memory lapses. In messages on his phone, he made disturbing statements. He admitted a desire to make an escort feel degraded. His arrest came as a shock to both neighbours, friends and family. All of them struggled to believe the allegations made against the man that they thought they knew. Nassim, a marketing specialist, lived with his long-term partner in a £600,000 semi-detached house situated in a private road not far from Amersham town centre. Neighbours expressed their disbelief and confusion, with one saying, "I am really just too shocked to say anything about him. He is our neighbour and a lovely man." Another neighbour questioned if they had the right person, saying, "He is such a lovely man and always very friendly, and he says hello when you meet in the road. This just does not seem right." Another neighbour, wishing to remain anonymous, recounted the night of the incident, saying, The police and an ambulance arrived in the street at about 10:30 p.m. last night, and we knew straight away that something bad had happened. Deliveroo driver Aaron Harvey, aged 24 and residing in a nearby block of flats, also recalled a concerning encounter with Christina Abbott's father. He mentioned speaking to the worried father the night of the incident. Harvey described how the distressed man had approached him. He said that he had been searching for his 28-year-old blonde daughter, and that he was growing increasingly concerned. He said no one had heard from her for about 10 hours and he was worried. And I felt sorry for him. He was panicking. I said I had seen a blonde girl who didn't live here quite a bit recently, but I didn't know her. I hadn't seen her that day. During the trial, the judge said that he had presented himself as a well-spoken, educated, and professional man seeking enjoyment, but the reality was much different. She pointed out the considerable stress arising from his unstable work situation, and they noted his growing obsession with escorts. This was coupled with a spiraling issue of stimulant and alcohol addiction, both of which were getting more and more out of control. During his court appearance, Nassim, dressed in grey jogging bottoms and a top, spoke only to confirm his name, date of birth and address. Nassim had repeatedly denied the charge of murder. Instead, he claimed that he had acted in self-defense. He claimed that a red mist may have clouded his judgment during the incident. The prosecutor firmly dismissed Nassim's testimony, saying it was all a pack of lies. The banker was accused of subjecting his victim to a terrible attack. An attack in which a post-mortem examination later revealed that Abbott's had endured 13 head injuries. This was along with compression injuries to her neck, consistent with being throttled. At some point around midday, Nassim struck Abbott's on the head with a kitchen pestle, leaving her on a bed in a horrifying scene surrounded by her own vital fluids. It was also discovered that Nassim remained in the flat for 12 hours following the murder. During this time, he engaged in alcohol consumption, substance use, and the transmission of explicit and adult material. This included pictures and videos of himself involved in intimate acts with other escorts. The flat yielded additional evidence, including a blood-stained bottle of brandy, stimulants, poppers, and the other half of the pestle and mortar. Nassim's DNA-ridden fingerprints were also found on the bath, a sharp kitchen implement, and on Christina's iPhone. However, Nassim claimed that Christina had attempted to throttle him during an adult game, and that he responded by striking her in self-defense, losing control in the process. However, he was unable to provide an explanation to the jurors regarding the presence of the pestle, an object which was coupled with a mortar bowl discovered in the bedroom by the investigating officers. As a result, the jury did not accept his explanation. They totally rejected his claims of self-defense and loss of control. On January the 10th, 2019, after just 2 hours and 40 minutes of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict, finding Zahid Nassim guilty of murder. Prosecutors' assessment suggested that Nassim attacked Christina simply because he was angry and jealous. He was triggered when she appeared to divert her attention to the birthday messages on her phone, seemingly neglecting to give him the attention that he wanted. Attention that he perhaps demanded due to the exchange of money. This alleged altercation over her attention is believed to have escalated into a fatal incident. Additionally, the judge described Nassim's attack on Abbott's as being of extraordinary ferocity. She pointed out the considerable pain inflicted based on the extent of her injuries, noting the unimaginable terror she must have endured in her final moments. She also acknowledged the nature of Abbott's profession as an escort, saying that she had chosen to earn her money in a business with a long history, but one that had always carried significant risks of danger. Christina Abbott's parents, along with her brother, wept in the public gallery while a victim impact statement was read to the court. In this statement, her father, a retired BT engineer, expressed the constant worry he and his family had regarding their daughter's safety, along with her financial situation while she lived in London. Christina had always assured them that she was doing okay, but the family missed her visits. Visits in which she had the power to brighten their lives with her happiness and positivity. He spoke of their shattered dreams, saying, "I was hoping one day to walk her down the aisle. She would have been such a beautiful bride, and instead we had to take her in a coffin." He added, "May she rest in peace. We love you, Christina, and miss you so much." The parents also clarified that Christina had held legitimate jobs in a state agency and events, and they wanted to emphasize that she was much more than how she was portrayed in the case. They highlighted that Christina remained a loving, caring and loyal daughter, sister, niece and friend. In a post-sentence statement, they described the impact on their personal and professional lives. They said, "This has had a tremendous impact on our personal and professional lives, as we have not been able to meet commitments due to the level of stress and shock we have been experiencing. We have our family tradition of going on holiday every year. We visited Tenerife and Lapland last year." Christina said in April, "Mummy, why don't we go to southern France this year for our family getaway?" But instead of planning the holiday, we had to go and plan her funeral. She was beautiful inside and out and also very kind to others, putting everyone else's needs first. Detective Chief Inspector Gemma Heater of Sussex Police also expressed her condolences for Christina Abbott. She acknowledged the strength and dignity displayed by Christina's friends and family throughout the case. Heater also mentioned that Zahid Nassim, after receiving medical treatment, cooperated with the investigation and openly discussed his knowledge of Christina and the true nature of their relationship. However, right until the end, he denied any intent to kill Christina. He attributed the incident to alcohol and substance consumption. He still to this day claims no recollection of how it all unfolded. Heater highlighted the far-reaching impact of Nassim's actions, affecting not only Christina's family but also his own. Now, everyone involved faces the challenges of rebuilding their lives. Zahid Nassim was sentenced to a minimum of just 19 years in prison. Brembate de Sopra is a small and picturesque town. It is 4 miles northwest of the city of Bergamo in northern Italy. With just 8,000 residents, it is a humble town, with homes still using wood-burning stoves, raising chickens, and growing their own vegetables. Among this rural community lived the Gambarazio family. Fulvio, an architect, and his wife Mara, a teacher, had lived there all of their lives. Their families had been in the area for generations. Fulvio and Mara had 4 children. The eldest was daughter Kiba, aged 15, Yara, who was 13, and then 2 younger sons, Nighton and Jia Lee. Yara was passionate about gymnastics, she enjoyed school, and she loved being with her siblings. Now a teenage girl, she was known for her dark curly hair. She always wore it free and wild, unless that is, she was at gymnastics. At gymnastics, Yara was a different person. She was poised, composed and measured. This was far from the happy, carefree soul that she was day to day. But she loved her sport and she had hopes and dreams of being the very best. At 13 years old, she had all of the time in the world to make those dreams a reality. On Friday the 26th of November 2010, it was just another Friday in the small town. Yara was gearing up for a gymnastics competition that weekend. She'd been practicing her routine almost endlessly. To do this, she had borrowed her instructor, Sylvia's stereo to use at home. She knew that she needed to return it before the weekend, and at 5:15 p.m. on Friday, she left her home for the sports centre to go and meet Sylvia. At this time, the weather was cold and there was snow in the air. The sports centre was just 700 metres from Yara's house. This was a route that Yara had walked alone hundreds of times. It took only 10 minutes at the very maximum. The sports centre was a large building, very much like a school. It had a big gate, multiple entrances, tennis courts, a running track and a swimming pool. Once there, Yara returned the stereo to Sylvia and then caught up with a few of her friends before doing a training session. It was the big competition that weekend after all. An extra half an hour of practice could make all the difference. She finished up and left the sports centre building at around 6:45 p.m. Shortly after, she sent a text message to her friend Martina, arranging to meet on Sunday at 8 a.m. Mother Mara didn't expect her to be gone for very long, so waiting at home, she kept a close eye on the clock. By 7 p.m, she had grown worried. The need to get Yara home safe and warm was made more immediate. The snow outside was getting heavier, the conditions growing more extreme by the minute. And besides the weather, Yara definitely should have been home by now. At 7:11 p.m, the mother phoned Yara's phone. However, the call went straight to voicemail. After checking the sports centre to no avail, 20 minutes later, Yara's father made the decision to call the police. The call was put through to the public prosecutor's office in Bergamo. There, the prosecutor on duty was Letitia Ruggieri. She was a tough former policewoman who had earned respect within the force. She worked against the Sicilian mafia in Sicily in southern Italy. She also didn't waste any time, and within 5 minutes of receiving the call, she had dispatched both state police officers and the Carabinieri military police to the village. The family was understandably already fraught with worry. People came out of their houses to help search for Yara. The fire department walked the banks of the river. Police and volunteers searched the nearby fields, abandoned buildings, and asked passers-by if they'd seen any sign of Yara. The sports centre too was searched inside and out. Dogs were used to track the path where Yara had walked. However, these dogs didn't follow the path back to Yara's home. Instead, they trailed off towards Mapello. This was a small hamlet 3 kilometers in the opposite direction. By this time, the team had been able to analyse the last signals from Yara's mobile phone. Her phone had shown a signal in Mapello at 6:49 p.m, back on the evening of her disappearance. This was 5 minutes after Yara had sent a text message to her friend Martina. This means Yara, or at least her phone, must have travelled by car to where it was last pinged in Mapello. Yara obviously couldn't drive, so who was she with? Had she simply taken a taxi ride? Had she maybe run away with a friend? Or, the most sinister option, had Yara been kidnapped, taken against her will? Surveillance video footage was released. It showed a vehicle driving past the sports centre. It was a small white utility vehicle with an open back. We call them flatbeds in the UK. This vehicle was captured driving past around the time of Yara's disappearance. The same vehicle was also shown to pass several more times on other days leading up to Yara going missing. Frustratingly, no registration plate was able to be identified on the footage. So instead, police released images of the vehicle itself, all in the hope that either the owner would come forward or someone else who recognised the vehicle would come forward instead. However, no one did, and the case went cold over Christmas. This investigation was at a dead end. On the 25th of February 2011, 3 months after Yara went missing, investigators finally had a breakthrough. A local man had recently bought a remote-controlled aeroplane. He was still learning how to fly it, so he found an open field in a small town around 6 miles from where Yara was last seen. This was somewhere where the man felt he could fly his plane freely. This area is surrounded by industrial estates, spare lots and fields. As he flew the remote-controlled aircraft, he discovered that it wasn't quite working properly. So he landed it amongst some tall grass. As he walked over to pick it up, he saw what he thought were some rags and rubbish on the ground. However, as he got closer, he was met with a harrowing sight. He saw shoes, girls' shoes, and a body It was frozen and partly degraded. This was sadly the body of Yara Gambarazio. Now I know what you're probably thinking. How did it take 3 months to find Yara's body? She was found just 10 kilometers from her home, and this field had already been searched in the days after Yara's disappearance, so things didn't quite add up. The police speculated that the killer dumped her body after watching them search the area. Still nearby to the body, they found Yara's iPod and house keys. They found the SIM card and battery for her LG phone, but the phone itself was missing. The autopsy found she had suffered a head injury, possibly inflicted with a rock, and several blows to the body. She had also been jabbed at with a sharp implement numerous times, but it was determined that she didn't actually pass from these lacerations, nor from the loss of vital fluids. Yara had instead died from exposure to cold weather after she lost consciousness. There were also traces of lime in Yara's respiratory tract, and the presence of a vegetable fibre used to make rope on Yara's clothing. The killer may have worked in the building trade, and this wasn't all the killer left behind. Male DNA was found in Yara's underwear. I know what you're probably imagining this DNA sample was. However, from the available information, it was in fact the male's blood. This led police to the theory that it was likely that the attacker had attempted to violate Yara. However, the strong gymnast put up a good fight, or possibly his intentions were interrupted in some other way. Regardless, the police had something solid to go on. The killer was given a nickname, Unknown One. They now had their man, but they still had to find him. The search for Unknown One included a secret team of 8 special agents. They asked for volunteers to submit DNA samples to help catch Yara's killer. Classmates, families of classmates, friends and members of the community all came forward. A staggering 22,000 people from the area volunteered their DNA. DNA matching was slow work. It took different geneticists in Parma, Pavia and Rome a minimum of 6 hours to transform just a few samples of DNA into something which could be read and compared. The cost of materials and manpower made this investigation one of the most expensive manhunts in Italian history. Investigators eventually made a breakthrough. They found one person who volunteered their DNA closely resembled the prime suspect, Unknown One. He was a 20-year-old man named Damiano Quarioni. Damiano was quickly excluded as a suspect. He had been in South America when Yara disappeared, and his DNA wasn't an exact match. However, it was clear that he was a close blood relative of Unknown One. Brigari and her team were ecstatic, feeling that it would only be a matter of days before they would have the murderer behind bars. The team tracked down Damiano's family and found out that his mother, Aurora, had worked for Yara's family for 10 years as a housemaid. Aurora lived nearby and had been at Yara's house twice a week since she was a baby. In fact, Aurora and Yara were very close, and Yara always asked her for advice on her gymnastics routines. Aurora, who was very protective of Yara, was forever telling her to be careful. When investigators questioned her, she said it was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. She said she was completely distraught, but she also said that she wasn't responsible. Aurora was subsequently cleared and the team turned their focuses to Damiano's father. He had a brother, Giuseppe Quariano, who had died in 1999. The team contacted his widow, Laura. He found an envelope with a stamp on it in a box of documents that had belonged to her husband. Giuseppe had been the one to lick this stamp, which left his DNA behind. They were able to confirm it was Giuseppe who had licked the stamps, and his DNA sequence was an even closer match to Unknown One than Damiano's was. Giuseppe was the father of Unknown One. The team started to build a picture of Giuseppe and his family. Giuseppe and Laura had 3 children, a daughter and 2 sons. DNA checks showed that neither son was unknown one, so that left only one possibility. Somewhere out there was the illegitimate son of Giuseppe. Police were near to making a complete U-turn in their investigation. Instead of searching for a man, they were searching for a woman. The killer's mother, a woman possibly in her 60s, who had an affair with Giuseppe decades earlier. She then got pregnant and went on to have Giuseppe's son, who then went on to kill Yara. There were 532 women listed as possibly being the mother of unknown one. The team began the task of tracking down each one of these women. As police conducted their own hunt for the mother of unknown one, the villages surrounding Bergamo were searched. Conversations and whispers led police from one house to the next. One by one, they spoke to each woman on their list of over 500. By this stage, it was June of 2014. This was 3.5 years since Yara had first disappeared. The chance of this killer still being in the hilltop villages of Lombardy seemed unlikely. However, police were persistent, and one day they finally got a name. It was finally given reluctantly in a whisper: Esther Azul. In the late 1960s, Esther had been Giuseppe's neighbour. She married a man named Giovanni Bassetti from a nearby village. Esther and Giovanni lived in Brembate di Sopra, the small village Yara had lived in and disappeared from. Esther denied ever having an affair with Giuseppe, but the police knew that her sons were born in the right period of time, meaning that she was probably lying. One son was quickly ruled out, but the other, Massimo Bassetti, was a 42-year-old married father of 3, and he lived in Mapello, the very place where the last signal from Yara's phone had pinged. He was a bricklayer nicknamed the Animal by his friends. When he was younger, he was known to love partying. He was short and thin with piercing blue eyes and a peroxide pencil goatee. Within a few days, the investigators decided the best approach would be to set up a roadblock near his house for random breath testing. This way, they could collect his DNA without him suspecting anything. Massimo was driving home with his wife and 3 children when he was stopped by police. The officer knew exactly what he was doing. He pretended the first breath test didn't work, and so he performed a second one. The officers now had 2 sets of Massimo's DNA, and Massimo had no idea this seemingly innocent random breath test was actually a test to confirm if he had murdered Yara. The following day, on the 16th of June 2014, Ruggeri received the call she had been waiting for. Massimo Bassetti was unknown one. On the 16th of June 2014, the very same day, Massimo was arrested whilst working on a local construction site. He had no prior criminal record. He denied any involvement in the crime, and he said that he was altogether innocent. The last piece of the puzzle fell into place when the investigators matched Massimo's vehicle to the small white utility vehicle that had been spotted on CCTV all those years earlier. Massimo argued that he just happened to drive by the sports centre on his way home from work that day. However, police were able to confirm that he didn't work that day at all. Investigators used telephone records, surveillance video, along with testimony from colleagues to prove he was lying. They finally had their man. The trial commenced on Friday the 3rd of June 2015. Massimo had not moved from his claims of innocence. People were surprised that, facing such clear DNA evidence against him, he still claimed that he was not the guilty party. His wife testified he was home having dinner with her and their kids at the time of the murder. The trial would include 60,000 pages of records of inquiries, and 120 witnesses were called to testify for the prosecution. Massimo's defense said that they had 711 witnesses, as well as about 50 experts and consultants. However, the court made them cut this down to a total of 160 people. Sylvia Brenner, who was Yara's gym instructor that lent her the stereo, faced scrutiny at the trial when she became a focus of Massimo's defense team. On the night of Yara's disappearance, Sylvia's father confirmed that Sylvia had cried all night with no explanation. She also could not explain why she and her brother had sent text messages to each other at the time of Yara's disappearance, messages which they almost immediately deleted. But strangely, they hadn't deleted any other of their messages. A bombshell was then dropped in the courtroom, something that had never come out before the trial. This was the very reason why Sylvia became the defense team's hot ticket. The forensics lab noticed what they called dark halos, indicating the presence of blood on the sleeve cuffs of Yara's jacket. And when testing the stain, they discovered the DNA belonged to Sylvia. It was confirmed that there was no way for this DNA to have been left as contact DNA. And after 3 months in the element, it had to have been a significant fluid, such as blood. Sylvia was criticised for answering "I don't know" to at least 10 questions on the witness stand. This included how her DNA got onto Yara's sleeve cuff. Ruggieri and her team examined Massimo's computer after his arrest, and what they found painted a harrowing picture of a man who was interested in young girls. Massimo also regularly hung out around Yara's home, as well as a sports centre where Yara trained. He was seen on security footage circling the gym on different days. He would park nearby on some occasions. His phone was also found to have been in the area many times in the lead up to Yara's disappearance. It was even nearby on the afternoon that she disappeared. Massimo had switched his phone off at 5:45 p.m. the day that Yara vanished, and he did not switch it back on until 7:30 a.m. the following morning. A local woman testified that at around 7 p.m. on the day Yara disappeared, she was taking out the garbage at her home. Whilst outside, she saw a vehicle matching Massimo's pass by at high speed. She said she saw a young person inside, but she was unsure if it was a boy or a girl. She said she heard screaming coming from the vehicle, and it was cut off mid-scream. She went to the police and gave them this information as soon as she heard of Yara's disappearance. On the 1st of July 2016, Massimo Passetti was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Yara. Although Sylvia's DNA being found on Yara's cuff was an explosive development, and something the defense relied upon heavily, Sylvia was never a suspect. She was investigated thoroughly and subsequently cleared. Massimo has tried to appeal his conviction multiple times since 2016, but each of them has been thrown out. Yara's killer will never see freedom again. Therese Johansson Rojo was born on June 17, 1993 in Sweden. As a teenager, she found herself entangled in a web of toxic relationships. She was known for her outgoing and cheerful personality. She lived in a town called Stureby, and she documented her life in a personal blog. This blog made her quite popular among her friends. This popularity also attracted the attention of 16-year-old Tim Vreged. On May 13, 2009, however, her name became a source of contention. In her circle of friends, rumours swirled that she had shared a kiss with Tim on May 2, 2009. However, Tim was already in a relationship with 16-year-old Tove Lind. According to some friends of Tim and Tove, Tove was the one pulling the strings in their relationship. She was known to be very controlling and did not let her boyfriend spend time with others. One of Tim's friends said that since the two started dating, he never really got the chance to meet up with his old friends anymore. The conflict between the couple reached its peak as Tove, driven by jealousy and anger, confronted Tim at his school. This resulted in an argument that grew physical, and Tim was left injured. Their relationship, which began in 2007 when they were just 15, had always been tumultuous with infidelity on both sides. They were both involved in a local church, but their behaviour didn't necessarily reflect those values. Tove's overbearing nature strained Tim's relationship with his friends. Therese, who had recently ended her relationship with a guy called Gordon, was actually linked to the couple's turmoil by mistake. It seems that kiss had never actually happened. During the Swedish tradition of Valpurgisnight, a celebration of spring's arrival, Therese and her friends threw a party in the woods on May 1st, 2009. It was here that Tim and Therese shared their first kiss, and this was when the real troubles truly began. Little did Tove know that this was the fourth time that Tim had betrayed her trust, and the truth came to light around 2 weeks later on May 12th. This was the day after Tove's birthday. At first, Tim denied his actions, but he later confessed through a text message. This was sent on May 13th at 10:41 p.m. In a desperate attempt to reach Tove, he made 16 calls, leaving voicemails, and even sent her an email. He was expressing his deepest remorse and longing to make amends and get back together. The email translated read as, "I feel so awful right now. I don't know what to do. You have no idea how much I miss you. I mean it when I say I would kill someone. If you were to leave me right now, I would die. I love you above all else. I need you back in my life because you are the kindest, most amazing person in the world." The exchange continued with Tim and Tove texting each other during class. Tim was begging to meet her in person. Tove's response was harsh, but maybe rightly so. She was filled with anger and resentment. She questioned his worth and his loyalty, trying to use her words to injure his self-esteem. She said, "Don't forget, you're worthless. Worthless. Nobody likes you. You pig. You effing pig. And why don't you answer, you effing creep? I have an idea. Next time you're gonna cheat, why don't you pick up Linda? You're both ugly and disgusting. Smiley face." Tove wrote. Their teenage relationship had reached a breaking point, teetering on the edge of pure hatred. But as time passed, Tove managed to regain some composure. She began expressing her feelings more clearly, saying, "You just care about yourself, and you never keep your promises. Sorry, but I just don't trust you." During this period, Tim persistently contacted her multiple times a day. He gave the impression to their friends that they were going to get back together. However, behind the scenes, a much darker plot was beginning to unfold. These dark conversations began around May 15th and extended until May 23rd. Tove, in her deep anger and pain, demanded something horrifying from Tim. She wanted him to take Therese's life, the girl with whom he had cheated. Tim had previously said he would do anything to prove his love, and this included taking a life. Tove made it clear that unless he did what she asked, there was no chance of them ever getting back together. On May 26th, Tim left his house to confront Therese. He reached her address via the metro after looking it up online. Whilst waiting for Therese to return home, he continuously called and texted Tove. His true intentions at this time were still unclear. His initial plan was to catch Therese outside her home, but he had no real concrete strategy. Panic set in when Tove stopped responding to his calls and texts. Tim grew more desperate. He wrote, "I'm panicking. Please just answer me and I'll stay until she gets here. I can't do it otherwise." Tove promised to call soon, but never did. Tim eventually stopped calling after 9 unsuccessful attempts. The following morning at 8:30 a.m., Tove sent a message to Tim and confessed. "I'm sitting next to her on the subway. I just can't take it any longer. She has to die." In response, Tim agreed to do what she wanted, and that same day he made his way to Therese's house once more. However, Therese was nowhere to be found. At this time, she was at her friend Ina's house. However, Tim had no way of knowing this and had no idea where she could be. Since Tove had once again not responded after 8 attempts, Tim once more abandoned the plan. Unbeknownst to Therese, her life was in grave danger. She carried on with her normal life. She went about arranging her prom and updating her blog readers about her new outfits. Her parents asked about her prom date and she mentioned her friend, Daniel. But her true wish was to reconcile with her ex, Gordon, and go to the prom with him instead. That night, Tim told his new plan to Tove through a text message. It detailed a horrifying scheme. He wanted to lure Therese to search for a hidden bottle of vodka, and then when they were alone and she was vulnerable, the attack would take place. However, it seemed that Tove was still ignoring his texts. This left a sense of foreboding and tension hanging in the air. Tim seemed to be growing more and more desperate. On the following morning at around 8 a.m, as Therese was on her way to catch the bus, Tim emerged from hiding among some bushes. He made up a lie about owing some people some money and being late in repaying them, so therefore he needed to retrieve a bottle of vodka that he had previously hidden in the underbush as a substitute for the money. Tim asked Therese for her help in finding it and they ventured into the bushes together. However, this plan was interrupted when Therese's friend Ina called out to her from the nearby bus stop. She warned that they needed to board the bus immediately if they did not want to be late for school. Unable to help Tim any further, Therese rushed to catch her bus. But the weight of her decision weighed heavily on her throughout the day. Meanwhile, Tove and her family were away on a weekend trip to Paris on May the 29th. Tove told Tim that she no longer trusted him. She now insisted that she do the deed before she came back. In response, Tim shared details of his weekend plans. However, he now made no mention of intentions to harm Therese. As Tove asked him whether he had done it, Tim responded that he hadn't found the opportunity to do so yet. On June the 1st, Tove messaged Tim again, impatient and angry. She asked him why he hadn't been in touch as promised and if he had done it. Her frustration and hatred poured out through her messages. She accused him of being untrustworthy. She even implied that he was with Therese at that very moment. To her surprise, the response she received was not from Tim, but from someone else. Tim left his cell phone at my house. This is Ola. Tim had left his phone at his friend Ola's house. Intrigued by the content of their text conversation, Ola chose to read it. He found the messages unsettling enough to jot them down in a notebook. He later shared this text conversation with his brother Max, and the two of them discussed it privately. However, they chose not to disclose these details to anyone else. The plan was hidden in plain sight and now known to 4 people. On the evening of June the 2nd at 9:10 p.m, Tove texted Tim, giving him an ultimatum. She said if he hadn't carried out you-know-what within the next 2 hours, that their relationship was officially over. Tim begged for more time, asking for an alternative method to prove his commitment. Tove was growing more reluctant and skeptical, but Tim assured her he would carry out the plan in time for the prom. However, at 12:18 a.m. on June the 2nd, Tove sent her final message to Tim. The message read, "Until you do it, we are nothing." And after that, she stopped all communication with Tim. On the evening of June the 6th at 7 p.m, Tim, Max and Ola gathered at Tim's friend Dennis's house to watch some football. The 2009 graduating class with over 100 students had planned a celebration later that evening at Hopbacken. This was a large forested hill that had once been used for ski jumping contests. At 7:16 p.m, Tim sent Tove a text message saying, "I'll do it then if she is there tonight. Otherwise, I'll find out where she is. I'll see you later. Kisses." Tove once again did not respond. Around 9 p.m, Therese along with her friends Ina and Felicia arrived at Hopbacken. She brought a bottle of Magic Crystal vodka with her, and although she initially seemed to be acting normally, chatting and enjoying herself, the effects of the vodka left her feeling dizzy. Tim, who had just arrived with Dennis and Max, chose not to drink and appeared to be in a foul mood. While sitting on a rock on the opposite side of the glade, He made a comment about Therese, mumbling to Dennis, "I want to punch her in the face to remove her makeup, so that everyone can see how ugly she is." At 10:29 p.m, Tim sent a text message to Tove. It said that he was going to send her a message as soon as it was done. He told her not to turn off her phone and to call him immediately. Tove once again did not respond to his message. However, half an hour later, she too arrived at Hotbacken with friends Olivia, Gordon, Rasmus and Daniel. Tim pulled her aside for a brief conversation. This conversation left Tove feeling disturbed. Following their discussion, she and Olivia decided to leave Hotbacken and head towards Olivia's home for a sleepover via the metro. This meant that they avoided the unfolding events at the forested hill. At around midnight, Therese told her friends that she needed to use the restroom. She then headed off into the forest. Unbeknownst to her, Tim also left the gathering and ventured into the woods. However, Tim left in a different direction, but he then circled back, trying to find Therese. After a few minutes of searching in the darkness, he saw her beneath a cliff. He told her that he needed to speak with her. Still under the influence of alcohol, Therese sat down on a rock. Tim then picked up a log and struck her on the side of the head. However, this rotting log broke easily, splintering into soft pieces. As Therese attempted to rise to her feet, she cried out, yelling, "What are you doing?" Tim, however, forced her to the ground. There he lay on top of her and wrapped his arm around her neck. This created a form of chokehold. Despite her struggling, he tightened his grip on her neck. Eventually, she was left unconscious. However, Therese was still breathing, so he now looked for a stick in the dark and used it to press down on her neck, crushing her windpipe. After several minutes of applying pressure, he let go, although he still couldn't be sure that she had truly stopped breathing. To confirm, he kicked her in the stomach twice to see if she would react, but she didn't. After this, he fled the forest and returned home, leaving behind a horrific and tragic scene. The disappearance of Therese deeply worried her friends, and when she failed to return after heading into the forest, they began searching for her. Ina and Therese, who were having a sleepover, were to be picked up by Ina's mother, so it was unusual for Therese to leave without informing anyone and leaving her purse behind. Her friends then spent 45 minutes walking through the woods, calling her name, but they couldn't find her. They then reached out to Tim and Tove through calls and text messages, desperately hoping to find Therese alive and well. After another 10 minutes of fruitless searching, the friends decided to call the police. And that is when Daniel, Rasmus and Gordon made the grim discovery of Therese's lifeless body in the bushes near a trail. They called out to the others. Everyone rushed to the scene. Max's parents, who lived nearby, called 911 and arrived at the location. CPR was performed in a desperate attempt to bring Therese back to life. However, this was far too late. On Saturday, June the 7th at 6:15 a.m, Tim was arrested at his home. Tove was also taken into custody at around 9:30 a.m. from Olivia's residence. At first, both denied any involvement in the murder. However, on June the 10th, Tim confessed to his priest that he was the one who had taken Therese's life. He said that Tove had told him to do it, and the police discovered text messages that supported his claim. During questioning, Tove said that she never had any genuine intention for Tim to kill Therese. Her motive was to end the relationship, saying that Tim would not accept a simple breakup. In an attempt to save herself, she devised what she believed was an impossible challenge for Tim. Driven by their Christian upbringing, she couldn't fathom that Tim would actually commit a murder. Her plan was that, when he eventually failed, that she would finally be free from him. However, the judge did not accept her explanation. Tove was sentenced to 4 years in a juvenile jail for soliciting murder. Tim, on the other hand, was found guilty of murder. He received a 4-year sentence in a juvenile correctional facility. Both teenagers were expected to be released in the summer of 2011. This case had a significant impact on Swedish society. It prompted a newspaper to launch a campaign called Glöm inte Therese, or Don't Forget Therese, on June 12, 2009. As part of this campaign, money was raised to support the organisation BRIS, which works to help children in crisis. Although I'm sure this is small consolation for Therese's family. This is the true story of Justine Valdez, a hard-working and dedicated young woman, someone that was building a new life with the help of her parents. She had the bravery to move across the planet, and worked harder than most to achieve her dreams. But after stepping off the bus one night, she all but vanished. What would become of Justine? Justine Valdez was born in the Philippines in 1994 to parents Teresita and Danilo. She was extremely loved, and her parents wanted more for her than they felt their home country had to offer. Mum and Dad both made the hard decision to move to Enniskerry in the Republic of Ireland, leaving young Justine at home. They did this so that they could build a solid foundation for the future of their daughter, and this is something that they successfully achieved. In 2015, Justine was now in her early 20s and made the big move to live with her parents. She was studying accountancy, a solid career choice indeed. Obviously a very driven and hard-working young woman, Justine also worked as a care assistant and in a restaurant to help ends meet and support the family. She was on the road to success, and her parents were standing right by her side. By Saturday the 19th of May 2018, Justine was now 24 years old. She had blossomed into a beautiful young woman and was making the family's dreams a reality. She had a small stature, standing at just 5 feet tall, but she was packed with drive and enthusiasm. The family, now reunited, cherished their time together more than many of us could imagine. When Justine was out and about, the family would be in almost constant contact. On this day alone, over 60 messages were shared between the three throughout the day. Justine had quite a busy day. She had to visit the police station in order to work towards renewing her residency permit to stay in the country. From there, she went to the gym to get a workout in. At 4:20 p.m, the last reciprocated contact was made between the mother and daughter. Teresita asked Justine to go and buy some bread on the way back to their house. After leaving the gym, still wearing her workout clothes, a white shirt, trainers, grey leggings and a dark jacket, Justine carried out her mother's request and then jumped on the number 185 bus in Bray. This was at 5:40 p.m. The 185 pulled into Enniskerry village just after 6 p.m. and Justine left the bus. She then started the short 15 to 20 minute walk home. But rather than walking through the front door, Justine instead vanished. Mother Teresita noticed almost immediately that something wasn't right here. The contact between the two throughout the day had been almost constant. If Justine had changed her plans, then she definitely would have let her mother know. But there was nothing. She should have been home. Teresita reported her daughter as missing and information began to come together. In fact, before Justine's mother even knew that there was a problem, the police had already received their first call. There were witnesses to Justine getting off the bus. In fact, disturbingly, at 6:24 p.m, the police received a call from a concerned member of the public. The call was from a female driver who was in the car with her son. She saw a woman of Asian descent, dressed in grey leggings, a dark jacket, white t-shirt and trainers, being forced by a man into the boot of a Nissan Qashqai. What she witnessed was horrifying, and the car drove off into the evening. Next, around 10 minutes later, another motorist saw the same Nissan. The woman was still in the car, now screaming. She could be seen in the boot compartment of the Qashqai, banging on the windows, desperately. This woman was Justine Valdez. The second witness originally thought it was a child in the car and considered minding his own business. However, upon returning home to his wife and following a discussion, the man then reported what he had seen to the police. He made this call at around 7:20 p.m, almost an hour since Justine was taken. Police attended the scene that Justine was spotted by the woman being bundled into the boot of the car. At this location, they made a discovery that I found really quite emotional. Her phone was smashed on the floor, and the bread that she had bought for her mother was there, strewn on the floor. Things were going south fast, and the police believed that Justine was in severe danger. The search for Justine Valdez was launched. What followed was a massive search operation. It included patrol cars, dogs, and a police helicopter. Even with the best efforts of police officers, the trail for Justine had gone cold. Saturday night ran into Sunday morning, and suddenly came a breakthrough in the case. At 3 a.m, the owner of the Nissan was identified. It belonged to a married man, a man with 2 young daughters, the younger of which had only been born a few months before in September. He had a respectable job working as a banksman on building sites. This man was named Mark Hennessy. When police turned up to his house, he was nowhere to be found. Bearing in mind this was after 3 a.m, this was quite strange. Police spoke to his wife, Nicola, to try and work out if Mark really did have something to hide. She described how he went to work on the Saturday morning at around 7:30. He then came home after his shift at around 3 p.m, but then he left once more, saying he was going to the pub for a drink. This was at 5:25 p.m, an hour before Justine was taken. Disturbingly, wife Nicola hadn't seen Mark since. She couldn't figure out exactly where he could be. At this time, Mark was the only suspect in Justine's abduction. His friends and family joined the police in looking for Mark. We can only imagine how scared they must have been about what they may find. The pub that Nicola said Mark was going to had a visit from the police. They discovered that he had indeed been there, but only for around 10 minutes while the football was on. Luckily, the pub had CCTV installed and captured Mark leaving at 5:41 p.m. He exited to the car park where his Nissan was parked. He appeared to make a phone call that lasted just 2 minutes, and then he left in his car. Mark in his Nissan Qashqai was then captured once more on CCTV. This time he was driving behind the 185 bus, the bus that Justine was riding home on. But then the trail pretty much went cold until 11 p.m. when Mark returned to the pub. This left over 5 hours of Mark's whereabouts and behaviours unaccounted for. It brought the police no closer to finding out exactly where Justine had been taken to. This case was huge in the local area. Police held a press conference at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night, just over 24 hours since Justine was last seen. They shared the importance of tracking down the Nissan Qashqai, sharing its registration, and they didn't have to wait long before new leads came in from the public. A woman that had watched the press conference on TV had come across the car by chance. She saw the vehicle driving down the road and made the brave decision to follow it. The car pulled over into Cherrywood Business Park, and then she made the call to the authorities. Police sped to the scene and discovered not only the car, but also Mark. It seemed that he too may have caught wind of the press conference, and he knew that his time as a free man was quickly running out. As police approached the car and saw Mark still sat inside, they noticed he was covered in his own vital fluids from a wound he had made with a sharp implement. Mark refused to exit the car and give himself up. A tense standoff ensued. At this time, police believed that Mark still had Justine inside the car. They were scared he may harm her further. Firearms officers were now at the scene and 1 round was fired into the vehicle. Mark was hit in his shoulder. Now in a serious condition, he was pulled from the car. Paramedics tried to save him as police begged him to tell them where Justine was, but they got no response. His injuries would lead to his demise. Mark was no more, taking his secrets to the grave. Hopes of finding Justine alive were dwindling. She was not present in the car. However, police found a note scrawled by Mark left in the vehicle. It was heavily covered in blood, but specialists were able to remove it and read the writing underneath. They could make out the word, sorry, along with what appeared to be a location, Puck's Castle. This was as good a lead as they were going to get, and they sped to the scene. The area surrounding Puck's Castle was then subject to intense searches that ran throughout the night, sadly with no findings. As the sun rose on the 21st of May, 2 days since Justine was last seen, in an area of dense woodland in South Dublin, a body was discovered, quickly confirmed to be that of Justine Valdez. Upon inspection, it was confirmed that Justine had passed as a result of being throttled. This was thought to have happened not long after she was taken by Mark. Also revealed were abrasions and marks on her intimate areas, as well as the presence of a very small amount of an illicit substance taken an hour or two before her passing. Justine was not a user, so the presence of this substance was very unusual. However, it was discovered that Mark was a user, so this more than likely explains the presence of the substance in Justine. Police could not confirm any solid prior connection between Justine and Mark. There is a chance that Mark had seen Justine as she worked at her restaurant job, or perhaps as she got off the bus. And maybe Mark became obsessed, learning her patterns and abducting her in a well-planned attack. But of course, there is every chance that this was an essentially random event based on his dark urges. So why exactly did an apparent family man with a stable job turn into a complete monster? Why did Justine have to pay with her life for the wants of one man? Mark was in fact not doing as well as many people thought. His illicit substance use was spiraling out of control and his life was falling apart. His marriage to his wife Nicola was not going well. The couple were on the verge of separation despite their new family. Mark seemed to have completely signed off from the marriage. He was active on dating apps trying to pick up partners suited to his needs. His presence in the pub on the Saturday that Justine vanished was of no surprise either. He would regularly go out and attempt to pick up women in bars too. The exact reason for why he did what he did to Justine will never fully be understood. This is the story of Kaylee Haywood, a well-liked, bubbly and funny teenager. Someone that wanted to be loved and to experience new things. So when she got a random friend request, she accepted it readily and jumped headfirst into romance. But the morning after a sleepover, she never returned home. What had become of Kaylee? Kaylee Haywood was a 15-year-old beloved daughter and sister from Measham in Leicestershire. She lived with her mother, Stephanie Haywood, her stepfather Martin Whitby and her siblings. Although they had their issues like any teenager would with a parent, Kaylee was a shining light in her mother's life. She was described by her friends and family as vibrant and innocent, having a spirit of bubbliness and positivity, one that was infectious to all those around her. Making excellent grades in school and having a decent amount of popularity, Kaylee was well liked by pretty much everyone that surrounded her. Like most people her age, she enjoyed hanging out with friends and spending time on her phone. This was something that would prove to be more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. In November of 2015, Kaylee Haywood was enjoying a day at home like any other. Then she received a friend request on Facebook from a man named Luke Harlow. You might think twice before accepting a friend request from a random stranger, but this was before education about safety on the internet was as readily available or as well known as it is now. So without thinking too much about who this man could be, Kaylee accepted the invitation. I think at some stage all of us have given into curiosity like this. She then immediately received a message from the man. He introduced himself as Luke and asked how she was doing. Kaylee replied saying, "Fine, who are you?" After getting introductions out of the way, the two quickly exchanged personal phone numbers. Things quickly escalated and they began texting throughout all hours of the day. It didn't take long for Luke to express how infatuated he was with Kaylee. He complimented her looks and her personality, calling her babe and princess just days after meeting. He detailed how he wished he could be with her forever, so that he would never have to let her go. Kaylee too was infatuated by the way that Luke spoke to her. She had never received that type of undivided attention before, never feeling so loved and desired by anyone. Luke asked Kaylee to be his girlfriend after less than a week of talking, to which the conversation between the two abruptly became intimately charged. Luke talked about wanting to see her in person badly so the two could be a proper couple, making it clear that Kaylee was to keep it as a secret, saying, "I'm much too old for you, and I could get in trouble. People will think it's weird." Luke needed to make sure that Kaylee wouldn't tell anyone about their planned meeting. Kaylee agreed, thinking to herself that no one would understand that he was different from the other guys, that he truly loved her. After all, Luke was 28 years old, 13 years older than Kaylee. Promising her alcohol, laughs and a romantic getaway, Luke begged Kaylee to visit him, saying, "I could kidnap you and keep you forever." After some persuasion, Kaylee agreed to spend the night at his flat in George Avenue. The date was set, Friday the 13th of November. Kaylee got permission from her parents to stay with a friend for the weekend, having her father drop her off at a nearby community college. From there, Kaylee walked to Luke's flat to enjoy what she thought would be a blissful weekend, safe with a man who had rapidly become the love of her life. Upon arriving, Kaylee was immediately given copious amounts of alcohol by Luke. She became heavily intoxicated. Before long, Luke had engaged in intimate activities with Kaylee. Reminder, he was 28, she was 15. On the morning of Saturday, November the 14th, Kaylee's mother Stephanie received a call from her daughter. She was checking in for the day and letting her know that she would be home soon. After this call, however, Stephanie Haywood would never hear from her daughter again. After Kaylee didn't return home on Sunday morning, her family alerted the police to her disappearance. On that same day, a neighbour of Luke Harlow had found Kaylee's phone in the street, smashed to pieces. Police investigators worked swiftly, finding that Kaylee was in fact not where she said she would be on that Friday night. They were able to recover the text messages from Kaylee's smashed phone, discovering the correspondence between her and Luke Harlow, the 28-year-old unemployed school dropout. They quickly brought him in for questioning. Luke, however, denied knowing anything about her disappearance.
How did you become friends on Facebook? How did that come about?
I can't remember if I added her or she added me. I'm not 100% sure.
According to him, they had fun together on Friday night, but it ended with Luke going to sleep in his bed and Kaylee going to sleep on the sofa. The police knew that Luke was lying, showing them classic signs of deception. His palms were sweaty, he was continuously cracking his knuckles, grabbing and rubbing his own hands, showing the anxiety he felt about this entire situation. Upon pressing him further, Luke admitted to the fact that he had invited someone else to his flat the following night. This was 29-year-old Stephen Beedman. Luke had told Stephen that he had a bird at his house. Bird in the UK is kind of a semi-offensive slang for a female. Luke seemed confident that Stephen wouldn't be alarmed by the fact that he had a teenager sleeping at his house. But why? Any normal person would intervene. Biederman was someone who immediately ignited the concern of the investigators due to his past, putting the pieces together about why Biederman would be delighted to come and visit 15-year-old Kaylee. Upon looking into his history, police had found evidence of an intimate interest in minors, as well as significant anger issues. Even Biederman's family were fearful of him, quoted as being wary of his frequent, rage-filled outbursts. This was a piece of evidence that they couldn't afford to ignore. They brought Stephen in for questioning. When conversing with the police, Biederman stated that by the time he had arrived at Harlow's house, Kaylee was so intoxicated that he couldn't even hold a conversation with her.
We don't know where Kaylee is. We don't know if she's injured somewhere. So tell us right now, at the beginning of the day.
No, I don't.
You don't know where she is?
I don't know where she is. I met her Saturday night at 8. At 7, 8 o'clock. And then about 4 hours. And she was that drunk, she couldn't even... I couldn't get much conversation out of her.
Despite his testimony, the interviewers couldn't ignore a glaring question that stared back at them. What had happened to Stephen's face? He was covered in deep wounds, wounds that looked fresh. When questioned about it, Stephen explained that he had injured himself at work. But the investigators didn't buy this story. They decided to fact-check Stephen's statement. They visited his workplace to see if these claims were true. But they found more than they bargained for. Much to their surprise, the officers found an unlit bonfire at his worksite, along with a plastic bag filled with clothes. Upon further inspection, they were led to believe that these clothes belonged to Stephen, and they were covered in a reddy brown vital fluid. The red fluid on the clothes would be tested, and they would later find that it was a DNA match to Kaylee Haywood. Despite this earth-shattering evidence that they had discovered, the police weren't ready to confront Stephen with this evidence just yet. As they continued their investigation into Stephen's life, they also came across Kaylee's handbag and some of her clothes. Now they had what they needed, and they were ready to question Biederman again.
The 15-year-old schoolgirl has now been missing for 5 days, and police fear she may have been murdered.
As inquiries have been completed, we have become increasingly concerned that she may have come to harm. And today, we have told the family that we are treating her disappearance as a murder inquiry.
Now I feel hopeless.
Do you allow yourself to think that she might not be alive?
A bit.
This time, confronting him with the evidence, Stephen's story completely changed. According to his new story, an argument had broken out at Luke Harlow's house. This was late on Saturday night, causing Kaylee to storm out.
She's pretty much walking, because I must have scared her. I must have.
So is she resisting you at this point?
No, not when she was walking, no. I honestly can't remember. I've been drinking. We'd all been drinking.
The room remained silent as they waited for Stephen to continue speaking, but he didn't. But what Stephen didn't know at the time was that the investigators knew exactly how false his new story was. In the search for Kaylee, officers had questioned people in the area of Luke Harlow's flat, and they had received some damning eyewitness testimony from a neighbour. According to this neighbour, he had seen Kaylee running frantically from the flat at about 3 in the morning. She was wearing nothing but a t-shirt. Thinking that Stephen Biederman was a police officer, he witnessed him tackle Kaylee to the ground, pinning her in what seemed to be an arrest. Revealing this evidence to Stephen, they asked him again about what had happened that night, and why she ran from the flat in that state.
The issue is, she's run out, possibly, with her phone, without her trousers, and there's a complete, as you've described, disarray in the flat. The speakers are over.
So there's obviously been a struggle.
Well, that's the implication, but we're asking you if you can explain what's happened.
I actually cannot explain that.
The investigators, of course, didn't believe a word of it. They continued to press him about the events of that night, saying that Stephen had to remember at least something. Fortunately, this pressure worked. Stephen let a small confession slip out.
So there's obviously been a struggle.
Police saw this as a door opening and the investigators took a chance. After a long, grueling conversation, Beedman finally broke down, confessing to taking Kaylee across the street, attacking her, and ending her life with a brick. The wounds on his face were an emblem of her attempt to fight back. She did the right thing. Stephen blamed his actions on the huge amounts of alcohol that they had been drinking, stating, "When I drink, I just switch. But when I switch, I get violent. I wasn't in full control because I had been drinking."
Yeah, well, I obviously feel bad, then.
Why do you feel bad?
Because she's too young.
And what else?
None of the stuff.
What's the other stuff?
After the arrest of both Luke Harlow and Stephen Beedman, Kaylee's body was found in a field on the outskirts of Ibstock. Stephen Beedman was charged with her assault, imprisonment, and the ending of her life. Luke Harlow was charged with grooming, engaging in intimate activities with someone under 16, and false imprisonment. Since they both confessed to their vicious deeds, the trial proceedings were rather simple. Unfortunately though, it never became completely clear exactly what had happened during that Saturday where Kaylee was held captive by Luke and Stephen. Even in court, Harlow denied ever being present during any of the attacks that Stephen made on Kaylee. Even during the time that she was imprisoned in his flat all day and all night on that Saturday, he claimed to be asleep. Despite these differences in testimony and not having a clear picture, Luke Harlow was sentenced to 12 years in prison for his crimes against Kaylee. As for Stephen Beedman, he received life in prison, but Beedman wouldn't serve his sentence for long. He instead passed away in prison from heart complications in April of 2021. The case of Kaylee Hayward sparked a mission on behalf of both her family and Leicestershire Police. The mission was to increase education surrounding internet safety for minors. In 2016, they released a film titled Kaylee's Love Story. This detailed the final 2 weeks of her life. The film highlights how quick and easy it can be for children to be groomed online without them even knowing that it's happening. Its purpose is to protect children and stop another family losing a child in this way.
I'm bleeding badly. Help for me. The ambulance police are on the way to you. I've already called them. Just try and say where you are.
This is the emotionally draining case of the UK's very own Night Stalker. It's 1997, a quiet springtime in Lewisham, England. In Brockley Mews, a cul-de-sac with only 19 homes, everything is still. It was a quiet close with rail tracks on one side and Honour Oak Crematorium on the other. The cul-de-sac sat near some of South London's busiest roads, but it was itself quiet enough to see children playing in the road in the summertime. A leafy barrier of trees protects a terrace of 3-storey homes from the railway track opposite. Taking advantage of the sheltered feel of the mews, the neighbours bring their garden chairs out into the street to hold barbecues and domino games. It was pretty much a picture-perfect place to live, and in the last house on the left lived a happy family. The wife was wheelchair-bound, the husband, a former carpenter and minicab driver, was her full-time carer. It might sound challenging, but they seemed happy. He was a number one to all of us on the street because he was so so kind to her and so gentle, said Ray, a neighbour. He would take her on day trips if the weather was nice and come to my allotment to pick up fresh vegetables for her. The house was strikingly neat and clean, exceptionally tidy. There wasn't a speck of dirt and nothing was out of place. An almost ideal family home. The family were Jehovah's Witnesses. On a Saturday, they would come out in their smart suits and all go off to church together. The boys were friendly but respectful. They were always smiling, the neighbour added. The dad was definitely very attentive and caring. He was affectionate. They were a nice family. But no one could have suspected what was going on behind closed doors. The nice family in the last house on the picture-perfect street had a dark secret. Everything was not as it seemed. It was the 12th of October 1992. In Orpington, Kent, an 89-year-old woman was settling down to sleep in her bungalow when a loud noise woke her. She thought it was her neighbour, who often worked late shifts. It wasn't unusual for them to clang and clash as they let themselves into their door. Not everyone is careful or considerate, so she wasn't worried. Now fully awake, she headed to the kitchen to make herself a cup of tea. Once back in bed, she settled down with a book. As she turned a page, suddenly she felt eyes burning into her. There was a figure standing in her doorway. She saw a man. His face was covered by a balaclava. He moved towards the end of the bed, blinding her with the torch, shining it directly at her eyes. She tried to ask whether he wanted money. He shouted at her to be quiet. She scrambled for her purse, giving him everything she had. It was around £25 in notes and coins, not a lot, but he wasn't there for money. He unscrewed the bulb from her lamp, then forced a black glove over her face and mouth, leaving her feeling like she was being smothered. She couldn't breathe, she couldn't see, but she could hear. The man whispered, "Don't scream, I won't hurt you." But that simply wasn't true. He intimately violated her. The pain she felt was inexplainable. He was really brutal, I just wanted him to stop. The pain was awful, she said. The man went to the bathroom and when he returned, he threw her a towel for her to use. He then picked up his gloves from the floor and left. The woman, who suffered from osteoarthritis, had cuts to her lips. She also had horrific injuries to her waist and hips which required major surgery. The ordeal was terrifying and lasted what felt like hours. But crucially, there was DNA evidence left behind. When police reached the bungalow, they found an unsettling scene. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. It was well thought out. It was meticulous. The light bulbs had all been unscrewed. The electricity meter had been switched off and the telephone wires had been ripped out. The window had been removed to allow easy access and as to not cause any noise. But even with DNA evidence, the culprit had been too smart. The case simply went cold. His next offence occurred in 1998. This time he subjected an 81-year-old woman to burglary, indecent assault and other attempted intimate violations. Again, a DNA sample was left at the scene which allowed the crimes to be linked. But this was the 1990s. DNA just wasn't enough to catch him. Britain's National Police DNA database contained samples from anyone arrested for a recordable offence after 1995. But when they ran the samples of his DNA, they were coming up blank. It appeared that the suspect wore gloves every time, so there were no fingerprints. The hunt was on for a serial predatory individual attacking the elderly. In 1999, he struck again, this time in Beckingham, Colston, Croydon, Kent and Orpington. He burgled 6 times, indecently assaulted 4 times and intimately violated 2 elderly women. Many of his victims, aged between their 70s and 80s, were blind, deaf or suffered from Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. One of his victims, who had only just returned from a hospital stay, told how she was awoken in the early hours of the morning in August 1999, seeing a man shining a torch in her face as he removed the bulb from her bedside lamp. He again had gained entry by removing a pane of glass in the living room window. The 88-year-old woman who lived on her own in Croydon said, "I was shocked, petrified, dumbstruck. I did not know what to do." He pulled away her bedsheet, undid his trousers and grabbed her arm, forcing her to touch him. The woman pulled her hand away, quickly saying, "What would your mother think of you if she could see you now?" She was terrified and shocked. She was just staring at his face, paralysed with fear, wondering how long it would go on for. But to her surprise, it wouldn't be long. The mention of her assailant's mother was enough. Without harming her further, he left the woman in her bedroom, ransacked the house, and then left. The predator wasn't always cold and combative. The victims, who were both men and women aged between 68 and 93, said he would kiss them on the cheek, take their pulse, or engage in conversation with them for hours, before ultimately assaulting them in their beds. Even as he ransacked homes and terrorized them, he somehow showed compassion to some of his victims. He helped one to a chair and then back to bed while he was breaking into her home. At times, he almost seemed caring. He knew how to support a frail elderly individual, carefully holding the elbow to guide his victims around their homes. This made the police suspect that he had a background as a caregiver. In one case, he took a woman's pulse and after attacking her, he apologized to her. He said, "I'm really sorry. I won't do this again." But despite these fleeting moments of compassion, his reign of terror continued across South London, and he wasn't always so compassionate. In a particularly egregious attack on August 5th, 1999, he violated his victim twice and left her bleeding from internal injuries which nearly proved fatal.
I'm breaking up the right, I'm bleeding badly. Can you please get some help for me? The ambulance police are on the way to you. I've already called them. I'm just trying to say where you are.
In a later attack, he broke into an elderly Polish man's house in Croydon. He'd robbed the same house once before. This time, the 88-year-old man hadn't gone to bed yet. On this occasion, the perpetrator showed no compassion. Disturbingly, he intimately violated him. But this act wasn't for gratification. Instead, it was to embarrass the elderly man into not calling the police. Sadly, this was an effective method of silencing the elderly. It was believed that the predator had committed over 200 offences, but only a handful were reported. The media named the man the Night Stalker. He often took money, but only in small amounts. He also took credit cards and obtained pins from his victims, but there was no record of him ever using them. With so many offences, so many victims, and so many opportunities to catch him, it really is a wonder that he was able to continue for so long. In 1998, the police launched Operation Minstead after detectives forensically linked an offence in 1997 in South London to the first known case back in 1992. With no identity for their suspect, they nicknamed him the Minstead Man, and break-ins and characteristic signs became known as Minstead burglaries. Operation Minstead was the largest and possibly most controversial investigation Britain had ever seen. By 2001, there were 73 cases linked to the Night Stalker. DNA was found at most scenes, but as with the early cases, there was no DNA link to the national database. The Minstead Man was careful not to be caught. Detective Superintendent Simon Morgan took charge of the investigation. Looking through the case notes, he realised that the perpetrator had a distinctive method. From flattened grass found in the victim's gardens, police could see that the Night Stalker was prepared to wait for hours until he knew for certain that the victim had gone to bed. He'd attack by carefully and quietly removing the whole window in one piece to gain entry. He would move any ornaments away from the windowsills to avoid making noise as he entered. He'd switch off the electricity supply at the mains, cut the telephone wires and unscrew light bulbs around the house. He also placed any mobile phones above cupboards, making them harder to find. The police had little to go on. Descriptions from his victims suggested a black male aged between 25 and 40. He was described as about 5'9" to 5'11" tall, of slim athletic build and tending to wear darker clothing. He was usually wearing gloves, a mask or balaclava, and occasionally a baseball cap. He was also described as being softly spoken. Some of his victims reported a curious, sweet smell. Most victims were so traumatized, they were unable to recall any further details. It was left to behavioral profilers to help shine some light. They detected that he must have worked with the elderly at some point. He used similar techniques when lifting and moving his victims. They also worked out that he must have worked at night, as his comings and goings didn't arouse suspicions. In nearly every case, the police were astounded at just how clean and tidy he was. It was believed that the person they were hunting must have had obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. He was described as a gerontophile, someone drawn to older women for carnal gratification who often spends times in his victims' homes. D.S. Simon Morgan said that he believed that he enjoyed the domesticity of being with elderly people, but even with the profile, they were coming up short. In order to move forward with the case, the police decided to use a pioneering new technique called ancestral DNA profiling. It concluded that both of his parents originated from the Caribbean. This pointed towards Caribbean, probably the Windward Islands, St. Lucia, Barbados, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Tobago or Trinidad. More than 50 police staff volunteered to provide further samples that narrowed the profile down to the Windward Islands. Operation Minstead identified around 21,000 possible suspects that fitted such a profile. In 2004, detectives hand-delivered a letter to hundreds of black men in South London, asking for their help in voluntarily providing DNA samples for elimination purposes. They needed to reduce the number of suspects in the operation, and this was the best way to do so. Volunteers were assured that DNA samples would be destroyed as soon as they were confirmed to be unmatched with the Minstead man's DNA. The majority of those potential suspects were eager to help if it would assist police in catching the suspect. However, 125 men initially refused to provide samples, believing that the exercise was discriminatory and breached their human rights. Police pressured those who refused, explaining that their behaviour could be construed as suspicious, and they would be arrested for suspected intimate violations. 5 men were arrested. 5 innocent men. They were, however, subsequently cleared. Although they were able to reduce the list of potential suspects from 21,000 to 1,000, police resigned themselves to being able only to obtain the DNA of certain suspects still on the list if they were arrested for an unrelated offence. But the damage was done. The incident was seen as an abuse of power, but the criticisms for the police didn't stop there. After nearly 10 years of violent attacks on the elderly, the police were desperate. Detectives flew to Trinidad to make an appeal for information, but nothing. 4 of the country's leading criminal profilers were enlisted to create a comprehensive profile of the attacker. Detectives say this provided an amazingly detailed but chilling portrait. This still brought nothing. A new appeal was broadcast on BBC's Crime Watch programme, which featured a recording of a 999 call made by one of its victims. A reward of up to £40,000 is offered to anyone who provided information that led to the man's arrest, prosecution and conviction. But still, it was fruitless. On October 13th, 2002, 10 years after the first attack, he struck again. This time he left a vital clue, a footprint from a size 10 Nike Air Terra Countego trainer. 7 confirmed attacks took place in the summer of 2003 before another gap. In 2007, the police saw the Night Stalker's pattern of behaviour changing. He became more focused on stealing money. More importantly, his careful planning was beginning to falter and mistakes were being made. The frequency was also ramping up. There was a burglary on May the 11th, 2008 in Norwood, another burglary in Downham on May the 17th, a third on June the 4th in Lee. Detectives weren't sure why, but he seemed to be getting desperate. In 2009, the crimes rose to new prolific levels when 16 attacks were reported in just 19 days. The Metropolitan Police called in Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton. Sutton had just caught Levi Belfield. Belfield was responsible for the death of Millie Dowler, and they believed Sutton was the man to help. DCI Colin Sutton said, "I had been handed a poisoned chalice. It was left to Sutton to try and catch the perpetrator." Sutton decided that the DNA evidence was proving a red herring for the police. He changed tack and decided on a new radical plan, a stakeout focusing on the attacker's favourite hunting grounds. He discovered that in just one street in Croydon, the Night Stalker had been his most prolific. Deciding that this must be a significant area, he put in a request for 150 officers and 80 cameras to observe the region. The request, however, was declined, but a compromise was reached. Sutton got just 70 officers. On the first night of the observation, the Night Stalker attacked 3 times. This was a major breakthrough, but unfortunately the attacks were just outside of the areas being policed. The Night Stalker evaded capture once again. However, CCTV cameras showed a man fitting the description running towards a vehicle. Experts were able to identify a silver Vauxhall Zafira. This was potentially the car owned by the Night Stalker. 17 days later, a member of the surveillance team noticed a similar Vauxhall in the neighbourhood. An hour later, a man was spotted running to the same car. The police sprung into action, and moments later they'd caught up to and pulled over the car. The officer who pulled the car over, David Matthews, said, "I was quite aware that if this was the suspect, that he'd be prepared to fight. We searched the car and I opened the boot. There were latex gloves, a crowbar, a balaclava in there. This appeared to be a burglar's kit." He looked at me and he said, "What's this really about?" And I just said, "I think you know what it's really about." And it was like someone had switched a light out within him. His eyes glazed over and he never spoke another word. At around 2 a.m, the Night Stalker was arrested. The Night Stalker was Delroy Easton Grant. He was born in Jamaica in 1957. At 2 years old, his mother walked out of the family and left Grant in the care of his elderly grandparents. His father, a devout Christian, made the decision to move to the UK. Delroy Grant was 15 at the time, and not long after arriving in Britain, his criminal career began. It started small. At first it was petty theft, but he gradually got worse. He soon moved on to more serious offences, including burglary, later spending time in jail for armed robbery. In 1975, he met his first wife, Janet Watson. Many thought that this was the woman who could put him on the straight and narrow. Within 2 weeks, they got engaged. Janet believed she'd found her own Prince Charming, but after the wedding, things took a dramatic turn for the worse. She quickly discovered that he had an obsession with tidiness and being in control. Knives and forks needed to be in the correct drawer. If they weren't, there were consequences. Consequences that left her bloodied and bruised. Delroy Grant was a modern-day Jekyll and Hyde. In public, he knew the perfect way to behave and the right things to say. But in his own home, he was the master, in control, and his family must obey. The young couple had 2 children together, but after 5 years of Grant's abuse, Janet left. Delroy moved to Leicester, where he fathered another 2 children with a new girlfriend. This relationship didn't last too long, and in 1991 he was sent to prison for handling stolen goods. Shortly after that, the relationship ended and he headed back to South East London. It's there he met his second wife, Jennifer Edwards. She was a devoted Jehovah's Witness and the community welcomed him in with open arms. Finally, Grant had somewhere that he belonged. The couple moved into a house in Brockley, southeast London. There they raised their 2 boys and Jennifer's 2 girls from a previous marriage. When Jennifer was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, Grant, a former assistant in a care home, had to take care of her. He became a taxi driver by night and his wife's carer by day. His neighbours admired the way that he looked after her. He was known as a pillar of the community, good-natured, always smiling, a church-going family man. But unknown to everyone around them, beneath his devious exterior lay a sadistic, brutal burglar. Someone who targeted the vulnerable elderly and subjected them to the most horrific experiences.
Delroy Grant's court appearance was brief. The many charges he faces, rape, assault and burglary, weren't even mentioned. Police were given 3 more days to question him. At his home nearby, forensic investigators were still looking for evidence against him. His alleged crimes go back 17 years, to around the time his family moved in here. Neighbours described a friendly community and a man devoted to his disabled wife.
He's such a nice guy, but I just can't, it's a shock. It's unbelievable.
You know, totally devoted to his wife and children, and as I said, it's just come to a shock in this small, tight-knit community.
In Delroy Grant's back garden, evidence of one hobby, target practice with his air rifle. According to neighbours, Delroy Grant was a familiar figure here, often seen out and about in these streets, pushing his wife Jennifer in her wheelchair. Both of them are Jehovah's Witnesses.
Delroy Grant was tight-lipped. Even after his arrest, he said nothing that could offer any explanation as to why he did the things that he did. Days after his arrest, an officer went to his cell to provide him with deodorant. He was agitated, pacing up and down in his cell. He said, "I do not want to fit anyone up." This basically means he doesn't want to snitch. When asked what he meant, he said, "Have you thought about my son, Delroy Jr.?" When asked why his son might be responsible, Grant is alleged to have said, "He lives in the right area and he is the same height as me." But when told the information would have to be passed on, Grant responded, "No, don't pass it on. I don't want to fit anyone up." After over a decade of terrorising the elderly, he wasn't ready to confess. On the 3rd of March 2011, Delroy Grant appeared at Woolwich Crown Court to face 29 charges. These range from intimate violations, indecent assaults and burglary from 1992 to 2009. He denied all counts, having previously pleaded not guilty at the hearing held at the Old Bailey. He maintained that they have the wrong man and should be arresting his eldest son from his first marriage. It was clear that Grant had awareness of the number of breakthroughs in forensics and DNA. He was hoping that his son would share the same DNA and instead be convicted for his crimes. However, the jury were told that Grant's DNA proves a perfect match to the DNA samples found at the crime scenes. Grant's first wife, Janet Watson, was put in the witness box to hear the shocking revelation that Grant also believed he was being framed by her. He alleged that Janet stole reproductive fluids and saliva from him in 1977. He said that she had made him give samples of his reproductive fluid and saliva to get him tested for an STD after she discovered he was having an affair. After the marriage ended, he alleged his DNA was stored at a hospital by a male friend. He went on to say that 15 years later, his wife, out of malice, gave the DNA to someone else, all to frame him for a string of burglaries across southeast London. Prosecutor Jonathan Laidlaw QC said, "Your defence that someone planted your DNA is a lie born out of desperation, and because you have a complete inability to face up to what you have done. You simply refuse to face up to the burglaries and to the old people you attacked over the best part of 20 years. The idea that Janet Watson, who has already suffered at your hands, was behind this elaborate scheme to frame you is, the prosecution suggests, pure fiction and fantasy invented by you from start to finish." When asked why he did not mention his claims that his ex-wife had collected these samples, Grant said, "I just did not link the two at the time." Mr. Laidlaw said, "As you sat there day after day of interviews, are you telling the jury jury it didn't cross your mind that she was behind this. The prosecution claimed Grant's defense was something he had made up since his arrest, because he could not face up to the enormity of what he had done. It was a startling web of lies, because in the 70s the technique to recover DNA from male fluids and saliva hadn't even been invented. It showed the jury what a desperate man would do to avoid punishment. Mr. Laidlaw told Grant that, "We are already beginning to see that your account falls apart when it is subjected to the most gentle of examinations." Delroy Grant replied, "For what reason would I want to violate old women?" To which Mr. Laidlaw said, "That is a very good question." And he added, "If these charges weren't so grave, this would be almost laughable as an account. Ms. Watson is not behind all of these offences. She had a bad time at your hands when you and her were together. You were the softly spoken charmer. Once you were married, you treated her badly. The truth is, Ms. Watson didn't want to have anything to do with you as of 1979. The truth is, she's a thoroughly decent, hard-working mother who has had absolutely nothing to do with seeking to get you into trouble in the years that have passed." When Delroy Grant was arrested in Witham Road, Beckenham, the prosecution alleged that he was caught almost red-handed. Grant was found wearing 2 pairs of jeans and 3 t-shirts, which the defendant explained was because he had been decorating and also because it was cold. He claimed a torch found in his pocket was planted by the police, and that the crowbar found in his Vauxhall Zafira was put there by Ms. Watson's accomplice. Mr. Laidlaw said, "The luck you had had for the best part of 20 years was about to run out. You say it's not just Ms. Watson and her accomplice, but that the police have also indulged in this planting things on you." He added, "You have become a very sophisticated attacker and burglar by this stage." While his fingerprints were being taken in the police station, it was revealed in court that he arrogantly remarked, "I don't know why you're bothering. I always wear gloves." He took such lengths to avoid detection during his 17-year crime spree that not one of his fingerprints were ever detected. The jury heard about the burglary kit found in a Zafira on the night of his arrest. All of the items within it were linked to crimes carried out by the Night Stalker. To add to this, the police explained that he was wearing a burglar's kit of 2 pairs of jeans, 2 pairs of boxer shorts, 3 t-shirts and shoes but no socks. This would have allowed him to change appearance quickly, vital in helping him hide his tracks on CCTV footage. The evidence was damning. Everything pointed towards Delroy Grant. His arrest in November 2009 has been described as a fine example of good old-fashioned policing, a stakeout, a chase, and a clean arrest. But Grant could and should have been caught 10 years earlier. In May 1999, investigators received the sort of breakthrough that should have brought Grant's reign of terror to an end, stopping any more victims going through such an appalling ordeal. A member of the public witnessed a man acting suspiciously near the scene of a burglary in Bromley. They took a note of the registration number of the BMW they saw him getting into. Checking the vehicle details against the DVLA records, police ascertained that the BMW belonged to a man by the name of Delroy Easton Grant. Spotting that the burglary bore a number of similarities to the Night Stalker attacks, they referred it to Scotland Yard's Operation Minstead team. But a rookie detective accessed the wrong Delroy Grant, who, unlike the attacker, was already on the National DNA database. So when police checked his forensics against the sample left at the scene of an earlier attack, there was no match. Police went to Delroy Grant's home in South London, but their inquiries weren't thorough enough. An officer spoke to his wife and she confirmed that the suspect's car seen near the burglary did belong to them. But inexplicably, police never went to speak to Delroy Grant himself. In August 1999, Delroy Grant from South London, the Night Stalker, was ruled out. A spokesman for the Independent Police Complaints Commission said it was a simple misunderstanding which had horrific consequences. Grant went on to commit a further 146 offences after the blunder. In 2001, police received another potential clue. A caller to Crime Stoppers said an e-fit of the offender resembled a man working in a children's home, a man named Delroy Grant. Police now say that they do not regard this as a missed opportunity because the information they were given at the time was sketchy. The caller said the e-fit also looked like someone else. But both near misses in 1999 and 2001 raised questions about Operation Minstead, the operation that was meant to catch the Night Stalker. While it was nearly 2 decades too late, the court case was damning for Delroy Easton Grant. On the 24th of March 2011, the jury found him guilty on all 29 charges. He was given 4 life sentences. Police still believed he may have been responsible for another 600 attacks. Delroy Grant is still in HM Prison, Belmarsh. Now aged 65, he should never see freedom again.
He's a kind, gentle person, loving person. Yeah, well, I didn't go to her. He will never take another person's life.
Karina Ann Vetrano was born on July the 12th, 1986 in New York City. She grew up with 2 loving parents as well as 2 siblings, ones who valued integrity and servitude. Her mother, Catherine, was a nurturer looking after the home and the children, and her father, Phil, was a retired firefighter. He was one of the first responders during the 9/11 attacks. This upbringing is why Karina, after graduating from Archbishop Molloy High School and attending St. John's University, became a speech pathologist for children with special needs. Karina pursued a career where she was in service to others, but she never let her big dreams die. She was also an aspiring writer and an avid world traveller. She loved to write blog posts about her travels and her thoughts about the world. Poetry, musings and ideas flowed from Karina. She was a thoughtful person and she wasn't afraid to show it or share it with the world. In 2013, she even featured in a short film, The Paradox, directed by a friend that was inspired by her writings. Throughout her aspirations, she never lost the close connection she had with her family. In fact, she moved into the same neighbourhood as them in Queens, and she went on frequent jogs with her father through the parks. Unfortunately, it would be this bonding experience that would ultimately forever change all of their lives. Queens, New York is a borough in New York City which is diverse and dynamic. It's known for its rich cultural diversity. Queens is home to residents from all over the world. This makes it a melting pot of languages, of cultures and traditions. With neighborhoods ranging from bustling urban centers to peaceful residential areas, Queens offers a little something for pretty much everyone. Its attractions include Flushing Meadows Corona Park, the Unisphere, and a variety of museums. Altogether, this makes it a vibrant and exciting place to live and to visit. It is here where Karina's family would grow close and thrive. That is, until August 2nd, 2016. For years, Karina and her father had shared a cherished evening routine. They went on their jogs and bonded through it. However, on this day, their well-established tradition was interrupted. Her father had recently suffered a back injury and was unable to join her. Concerned for her safety, Karina's father asked her not to go. However, she offered soothing words of reassurance, saying that she would be fine. With a parting smile, Karina ventured out. She left at around 5 p.m. to embark on their familiar jogging route. But over an hour later, as the Vetrano family home grew quiet, Father Phil's worry for Karina had become intense. He couldn't shake the growing unease, a sense of something being wrong that gnawed away at him. Karina should have returned by now, but as minutes turned into hours, his worries deepened. Desperate for a sign that she was okay, Philip reached for his phone and sent a text message to Karina. However, the notification remained unanswered. Mother Catherine joined him in his concern, but they still hung on to the hope that their daughter might have made an unexpected stop. Maybe she visited friends or she got caught up in conversation. But as the skies darkened and more calls and text messages went unanswered, their parental instincts caused them to take action. Father Phil's instinctual response was to reach out to a neighbour. He was someone with experience in law enforcement. As it turned out, the neighbour was a New York City police chief, and he thankfully immediately answered Phil's request for help in searching for Karina. The community railed together, guided by Philip. They retraced the familiar jogging route, but after a while of searching along the path, Karina's helpless father made a chilling, life-changing discovery. Within a few feet from the jogging path, Karina's lifeless body was discovered. She was laying face down in the weeds, her hand gripping the grass beneath her. She was now only partially dressed, and her body bore evident signs of violence in the form of scratches and bruises. This distressing scene was a stark illustration of a gruesome crime. The wave of shock and grief that hit her family was profound. Her mother, Catherine, couldn't contain her sorrow. She ran through the streets with her cries echoing through the neighborhood. This discovery marked the beginning of a rigorous investigation into the circumstances surrounding Karina's passing. No one could fathom who would want to hurt a beautiful helping hand in the world who came from such a heroic family. The autopsy results left no room for doubt. Karina Vetrano had been throttled. Her passing was declared a clear case of homicide. The examination revealed harrowing evidence of violence. She had been struck in the back of the head with a rock. It was clear she had fiercely struggled to fight for her life. She had bitten her assailant with such force that her teeth were cracked. Her hands still gripping the grass was evidence of her being dragged from the path. The marks on her neck were so severe that a handprint was left behind. This showed the full force of the assault. It was clear that Karina had fought for her life with everything that she had, gasping for breath as she attempted to hit, scratch, kick and punch her assailant. Unfortunately, her fight proved to not be enough. Karina, innocently going on a run, had fallen victim to a senseless crime. The response of her family to this tragedy was swift and determined, and the public were left wondering how they could keep women safe when they were out and alone. An award for information was announced, and a task force of 100 detectives was assembled to unravel this disturbing mystery. The search for answers began with DNA recovery in key locations. This was Karina's neck, where she had been throttled, under her fingernails reflecting the struggle against her attacker, and on her discarded cell phone which had been carelessly tossed into the weeds nearby. However, despite these valuable clues, there were no matches to any individuals on the police's database. This only deepened the mystery. The tireless effort to solve the crime would involve examining 600 DNA samples. Each one inched closer to finding the person responsible for this horrific act. The investigation continued to be a painstaking and heart-wrenching process. Police investigators reviewed more than 1,700 investigative reports. They left no stone unturned as they followed over 250 leads in their quest for answers. As the investigation continued, the NYPD took a significant step by releasing a sketch. It was of a man deemed a possible witness in the homicide of Karina Vetrano. They hoped this would finally bring them closer to solving this case. However, their tireless efforts would yield no results. Investigators grew weary and all leads led to dead ends. As the case grew colder, Queens County District Attorney Richard A. Brown took a significant step in December of 2016. He requested authorization from the state to employ familial DNA testing in the investigation. This would involve running the DNA profile from the crime scene through the state database. This was to identify any potential links to similar profiles belonging to relatives. This process focused on the DNA testing of Y chromosomes. They are found in males only. Meanwhile, the GoFundMe page established by the Vetrano family with the aim of providing a reward fund for anyone with valuable information had now earned over $290,000 in donations. The community's support remained steadfast as they sought justice for Karina Vetrano. As the investigation dragged on with no strong leads, many of the officers began to lose hope. But in January of 2017, Lieutenant John Russo remembered something that gave him the feeling that they had a new lead. He remembered a call that he had made to the police. This was regarding a man spotted in his own Howard Beach neighborhood, all the way back in May the previous year whilst he was off duty. The suspicious character had been wearing a hooded sweatshirt in warm weather. It appeared as though he was canvassing the area for possible robberies. As Russo noticed this man, he decided to employ the see something, say something mantra, so he called it in. Russo knew that this detail was minuscule, but he was grabbing onto anything he had left to aid in the investigation. With a sense of urgency, Russo had sought out the police officers who had responded to his 911 call. He hoped that they still had their notes from this dispatch. As he pored over their notes, they revealed that officers had arrived on the scene. And they did indeed locate this individual. They spoke with him and took down his identifying information in case of any future incidents. The reports from May of 2016 read that the name of this suspicious man was Chanel Lewis. He was a 20-year-old man with no criminal record. A deeper look into his past would reveal that at one point, he had expressed disturbing thoughts to a teacher. He revealed his desire to harm the girls at his school. Lewis was often described as a loner, which, coupled with his reported instability, added to the complexity of his profile. Although his criminal record remained clean, he had had some encounters with law enforcement. Lewis had found himself on the radar of the police on several occasions. He received summons for violating rules and for public urination. These seemingly minor offences now took on a different significance in their ongoing investigation. It didn't take long for police to locate Lewis. There they spoke with him and with his consent, they obtained a DNA sample like they had done with hundreds of others. The breakthrough in the Karina Vetrano case came when on February 2nd, 2017, it was found that Chanel Lewis's DNA did indeed match the samples found under Karina's nails and on her cell phone. This evidence was overwhelming. On February 4th, 2017, Lewis was brought in for questioning at the 107th precinct. After hours of interrogation, Lewis finally confessed to the crimes. This confession was recorded at the precinct in the presence of a prosecutor.
Approximately 10:33 a.m. and I'm activating the tape this time.
Okay, we're present in the 107th Police Precinct. The date is Sunday, February 5th, 2017, and the time is about 10:33 a.m. My name is Peter McCormick. I'm an assistant DA in and for the County of Queens. Present in the room with me at this time are Detective Barry Brown, ADA Michael Curtis, video technician Joseph Deal, and Chanel Lewis. Okay, Chanel, I'm about to be reading you your rights. After that, if you agree to speak with me, you may, if you wish, make a statement about and answer questions about an incident that occurred on August 2nd, 2016. Even though I've already spoken to someone else, you do not have to talk to us. I'm going to now read you your rights. You have the right to remain silent and refuse to answer questions. Do you understand?
Yes.
Anything you do say may be used against you in a court of law. Do you understand?
Yes.
You have the right to consult with an attorney before speaking to me or to the police, and to have an attorney present during any questioning now or in the future. Do you understand?
Yes.
If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you without cost. Do you understand?
Yes.
If you do not have an attorney available, you have the right to remain silent until you have had an opportunity to consult with one. Do you understand?
Yes.
Now that I've advised you of your rights, are you willing to answer questions?
Okay.
Yes? Okay. All right. All right. Chanel, why don't we start with, I think it was a Tuesday evening on August 2nd, 2016. Do you remember that date and that evening?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And where were you at that time?
I was in Spring Creek, at Gateway and Spring Creek Mall.
Okay, by Gateway and Spring Creek Mall?
Spring Creek Park.
Park?
Yeah.
All right. Were you inside the park?
Yeah,
Okay. And was anyone with you, or were you by yourself?
by myself.
All right. About what time did you get to the park?
About 5 o'clock.
All right. And how did you enter the park? From what street?
From, where, Bell Parkway.
From where the Bell Parkway entrance is to the park? All right. And what kind of park is this? What does it look like inside? Are the trees, grass, benches? What?
More like large grass.
High grass? Are there any trails in the park?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And were you on a trail or you in the grass?
On a trail.
Okay. What kind of trail is it? Paved or dirt or what?
It's kind of like dirt.
Mm-hmm. Okay. About what time would you say you got to the park that night? That evening?
About 5.
Okay. What was the weather like? Was it rainy, cloudy, sunny?
Well, it looked like it rained like in the morning, and then it got sunny in the evening.
Okay. And while you were in the park, do you remember what you were wearing that day?
It was a hoodie, a sweatpants, and a shoes.
Okay. What color was the hoodie? Do you remember?
Most likely brown.
Mm-hmm. And the sweatpants?
I think it's probably black.
Right. And the shoes, were they shoes or sneakers?
I think sneakers.
Okay. Do you remember what color they were, what kind?
Mm.
Okay. Now, while you were in the park, did something happen?
Yes.
What happened while you were in the park?
While in the park, there was this girl jogging, and then one thing led to another because some other situation.
All right. Well, the girl that was jogging, was she by herself or with anybody else?
By herself.
What did she look like? What was she wearing?
Well, I was going to say she looked like she was wearing a yellow tank top, maybe.
Okay. What kind of pants?
I wouldn't really know.
Were they long or short? Do you remember?
No.
You remember if they were long pants or short pants? No?
Mm.
Okay. And was she jogging? Was she coming from the same direction that you came from when you entered the park?
No, we were going opposite directions.
Okay. And when you first saw her, where were you? Were you in the grass or were you on the trail?
On the trail.
All right. And were you moving or were you standing still?
Like I was moving, listening to music.
You were walking or jogging?
Walking.
Walking? And you were walking towards her?
No, I was walking towards, and then got side to side, and then one thing led to another.
When you first saw her, though, were you walking towards her or the same direction as her? When you first saw her?
We walked towards each other.
Towards each other, okay. And she was jogging, you said?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you know if she had anything on her head or in her hands? Do you remember as she was approaching you?
She might have had a phone.
Okay. And where was her phone? Was it in her hand or was it clipped to her clothes? Do you remember?
It was in her hand.
Okay. And you said as she got next to you, when she got next to you as she was running and you were walking, what happened then?
And then, because of a past situation, I got angry and then started hitting her and stuff like that.
Okay. Before you did, where did you hit her?
Like in the face and like in the mouth.
In the face and the mouth. Mm-hmm. Before you hit her, did you grab her or did you just hit her right away?
I kind of grabbed her first.
Grabbed her? And, like, how did you grab her? What part of her body did you grab?
I started hitting her because of the incident that was going on earlier.
Right, but did you grab her before you started hitting her, or was the first thing you did was to hit her? What was the first thing you did?
I grabbed her.
Okay. And how did you grab her?
Like this.
Okay. With both hands?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what part of her body did you grab? Do you remember? Her shoulders, her waist, her neck? Do you remember?
Probably like around here.
Okay, around the shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And when you grabbed her, what happened then?
And then I started hitting her and stuff like that.
All right. Now, did you hit her with both hands?
Probably, yeah.
All right. And what part of her body did you hit with your hands?
I didn't hit any part of her body.
Her face?
Just the face.
Just the face? All right. About how many times did you hit her in the face?
Around 5.
All right. Was she standing when you started to hit her, or was she on the ground?
She was on the ground.
Okay. So when did she fall to the ground? After you grabbed her? All right. Now, when she fell to the ground, was she lying in the path, or was she off the path? The pathway. When she fell to the ground and you were hitting her, was she on the pathway or was she off the pathway?
She's kind of on the pathway.
All right. About how wide is this path, would you say? Like,
Well, a couple of feet.
okay. So it's not that wide, right? All right. And when you were hitting her in the face, was she face up or face down?
She was like face up.
Face up. Did she say anything at all? No. Did she scream?
No, because her tooth broke.
I'm sorry? Her tooth broke? Right. Were you covering her mouth at all? No? Okay. The tooth that broke, was it like in the front, the top, or the bottom? Do you remember?
No.
Okay. How long would you say you were hitting her for? About how long in time? I mean,
The whole thing was like about 5 minutes.
5 minutes? All right. And did you do anything else to her besides hit her? Did you put her hands on any other part of her body?
No.
Okay. Around her neck or anything?
Yeah, there was kind of separation.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
You put her hands on her neck, around her neck? Okay. Do you remember, was it one hand or both hands?
Both.
Both? All right. And how long did you have your hands around her neck?
I don't know.
Okay. Did you squeeze her neck when you had your hands around her neck?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. You don't remember for how long, though? Okay.
Because I was mad at the incident.
You were mad about an incident. Okay, we're going to get to that in a little bit, all right? I just want to find out what happened, all right? And was she still moving when you had your hands around her neck?
Oh, yeah, and then she dropped into the water.
Okay. Well, when you had your hands around the neck, was she on the ground or standing up?
She's still on the ground.
On the ground. Face up or face down?
Face up.
All right. And then how did her face go in the water?
I was strangling. We were near the water, and then I put her face in the ground.
Okay. You were strangling her, you said? And you
she,
put her...
No, she fell in the water.
Okay.
And then my hand was bleeding, so I went to wash off all the blood.
Okay. Which hand, do you remember? You just showed me your right hand, right? Your right hand? Where was it bleeding? What part of the hand? Your knuckle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when her face went in the water, was she face up or face down?
Down.
Down?
Okay. Face up.
A face up?
Yes.
All right. Was the water covering her face?
Mm-hmm.
And how long did you hold her under the water?
Oh, she didn't hold on to the water. When I came back, she was just...
Oh, you didn't hold her under the water? Okay. Was she moving when you put her face in the water?
She was not moving.
Okay. What do you remember? Was she still moving when you had your hands around her neck? At all?
Mm-hmm.
How was she moving? What was she doing?
Like, she wasn't really moving that much.
Okay. Did she try to hit you or touch your body at all during this time? Okay. What did she do?
Like, try to scratch me.
Okay. And did she scratch you? Where did she scratch you?
Like, on my face.
Okay, would that be on the right side of your face?
Probably one of these two, though.
Okay. Did she leave a mark or a scratch on your face?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. So at some point before she went into the water, she had stopped moving. Is that right? She stopped moving before her face went into the water, correct? All right. Did I'm sorry.
Kinda did.
Kinda did. All right. What could you tell if she was breathing or not?
What you said? Repeat the last question.
Could you tell if she was breathing?
No, the other one.
Oh, before that? I said,
Yeah.
oh, at some point before she went down, that she stopped moving, and you said kind of, right?
This is like after the water.
Well, that when you put her in the water, was she still moving then?
In the water, she fell in the
She
water.
fell. Was she moving then?
After that, she wasn't moving.
Okay.
Did she fall in the water when you first threw her to the ground, or when you're on the ground with her hitting her? Did she like kind of move towards the water?
It was more like a strangulation, and then she rolled into the water.
So it was after you had your hands on her neck that she went in the water. All right. And what did you do then? After that?
After that, she was just lying there, and then I got her by her ankles, and then picked her up by from her back and put her in the bushes.
Okay. Can you just describe to me like how you moved her? What part of the body were you holding when you moved her?
Like on the hands. And
Okay.
lifting up her back.
Were your hands holding her arms, or were your hands under her arms, or
like holding it?
Your hands were holding one hand on each one of her hands?
Like how you just grab, somebody, yeah.
You were dragging her by the hands or the arms, right?
Yeah.
And when you dragged her, was she facing down onto the ground or facing up to the sky?
Up to the sky.
Facing up, okay. And where did you drag her to?
It was somewhere off the pathway.
Off the pathway?
Mm-hmm.
What's on the side of the pathway? Bushes, trees, grass?
Like some really rough kind of trees. I mean, some really rough, it's called weed and leaves.
Weed and leaves, okay. About how high would you say it was? Was it high or?
Like about 8 feet, something like that.
Like higher than your head when you're standing?
Yeah.
All right. How far off the path would you say you dragged her into the grass? Like how many feet about?
Probably about 10.
Okay. After you dragged her in the grass, did you go back onto the path?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you got back onto the path, could you see her from where you were, from the path?
Mm-hmm.
I think you said, Chanel, that she had a phone with her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what happened to her phone?
She must have lost it doing all that.
Did you ever grab her phone? Yeah?
I might have touched it.
Okay. If you touched it, do you know where? Did you put it somewhere or?
No.
No? Okay, do you remember when you touched it?
No, I was still in a scuffle.
Okay. All right.
Did you touch anything else that she might have had with her?
I wouldn't know.
When you left her in the grass, what were her clothes still on?
No.
What was the status of her clothing? How was her clothing?
Kind of like pulled off.
Pulled off?
Yeah.
Okay, what was pulled off?
Like her clothes.
Her shirt, her pants?
Her pants.
What about her shirt?
Sure, I think it was still intact.
Still?
Maybe.
Okay. And when you say her pants were pulled off, were they totally off, or were they half on or half off? What were they?
Looked like kind of half off.
Okay. Were they down or up? I mean, her pants.
Kind of like down.
Okay. What about her underwear?
Maybe it was down too.
Okay. Did you touch her in any way in her vagina or her anus at all?
Mm-mm.
Not at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Now, you said that you did this because you had some anger, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Can you tell me about that anger?
Because, I used to live in a different address than I currently live right now.
Right.
And then sometimes there's this man that comes around there. He play like loud music and carry a lot of friends around there. I didn't like it because I feel unsafe and uncomfortable. And I like my place private and peaceful. And usually I just
Okay. What place was this that you used to live in? A different place? What place was
It was
that?
the same neighborhood, but different street. It was at Logan Street.
The neighborhood where you live now?
Yeah.
Okay, and where do you live now?
Where I live now is Essex Street.
What's the address?
576 Essex Street.
And is that a big house, little house? Or?
It's kind of like a 3-story.
Okay. What floor do you live on?
We live in the basement.
Okay. Who's we? Who do you live with?
My mom, my sisters.
How many sisters?
2.
2? Okay. What are their names?
Flip and Sweeter.
Okay. Are they older than you or younger than you?
Older.
Older. Okay. How long? And the place you said you lived before that, you said it was Logan Street. And that's near Essex Street, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And there was someone there who got you angry? Do you remember who that was? Do you remember who that was?
Well, no, I wouldn't really want to say his name.
Okay.
Is your brother? Do you have any brothers?
Yeah, I have a brother, but he don't live with us no more.
Is he older or younger than you?
Older.
Where does he live now?
He lives somewhere in East Flatbush.
How old is he?
About 27, 28, around that area.
What's his name?
Shaman.
Shaman? Do you see him a lot?
Yeah, he comes around the house once.
Does he know this person that you have an issue with?
Yeah.
Did that particular person, you don't have to tell us who he is, but did he make you angry that day on August 2nd, that Tuesday?
Yeah, because like every day he keep playing music and inviting his friends, and know we just live in a quiet block.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like all of these type of stuff.
Okay, and about what time was that? What time was that he was playing the music and got you annoyed and got you angry?
Pretty much all day.
All right. Well, and what time, when did you leave your house to go to that park that day?
Probably left about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock.
In the afternoon, early afternoon?
Yeah.
And how far is your house to that? It's called Spring Creek Park, right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
How far is your house from that park?
It's probably like a couple of blocks.
All right. And how did you get to the park?
Usually I just go to the industrial place and then go to the mall and then go across the bridge.
Okay. Did you walk? Did you ride a bike or?
Walk.
Okay. Was anybody with you? Did you tell anybody that you were going to the park before you went? Okay. And you entered the park through what entrance way did you get into the park? What street is that?
Bell Parkway.
By the Bell Parkway entrance? All right. And how far into the park did you walk when you first saw the girl?
I walked to one trail and then went to the next trail.
Okay. So how far would you say in distance you had walked when you ran into her?
What do you mean?
Well, at some point while you were inside the park, you were listening to music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And were you listening to music through headphones or the radio, or how were you listening to music?
My phone.
Your phone?
Yeah.
All right. And at some point while you're walking, listening to music, you see the girl jogging towards you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, how far had you walked, like from the point you entered until you saw her coming? Halfway through, more than halfway through, or?
It's kind of like one trail and then you go to the next trail.
Okay, so you took one trail to the next trail. All right. And from the time you first grabbed the girl until the time you dragged her into the grass and left her there, about how long you think that took? You know, when you punched her and strangled her, how long would you say it lasted?
About 5 minutes.
Okay. Now, had you ever gone to that park, like before this date? Would you go there on occasion, or?
Yeah, sometimes when I get angry and stuff like that.
How many times would you say you've been there before, to that park?
Like several times.
More than 3, 4 times?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you always go into the park by that trail?
Yeah.
All right. And would you always walk, or there were other ways to get there?
I always walk.
Would you walk the same route?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I choose a different route.
Okay. Did you ever go there with someone else, with friends or anything?
No.
No? Okay. Did you ever while you were in that area, did you ever once get spoken to by police in the area, like before this happened?
Like I got stopped once by the police.
Yeah. How long before this was that?
That was probably a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm. A couple of months before the August 2nd?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I know, Chanel, I know that, like last night, you really didn't want to talk about this, right? Last night. But today, it was okay, you wanted to talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that you told Detective Brown you wanted to straighten your life out, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then Detective Brown said to wait until you came in the room to talk about it, that's right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you did, right?
Yes.
Okay. I know that, I think Detective Brown showed you this map before when he spoke to you, right? Remember this map? Okay. Can you show me on the map, like where, what point, like that you actually entered into the park? Just put a little dot there. Okay, thanks. And is that the same way you went out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when you went out, were you walking or running? Do you remember?
Walking.
Walking, okay. And where did you go after you left the park?
Pretty much my hand was really hurting me, so I went home.
Okay. Was it like bleeding heavily, or was it just like a scratch, or do you remember?
Like it was sweating a little bit, so.
Sweating and bleeding?
And pain a little bit, so yeah.
Hurting? Right. And you said you had some scratches on your face, right? All right. Where did you go after you left the park? Did you go out somewhere? Did you go home? Or?
Went home.
Okay. Was anyone home when you got there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I got my own keys, so I just.
Right. Did anyone see you that evening?
Yeah, some people, they were asleep.
Hmm?
They were kind of, yeah, they see me.
Okay. Did they ask you what happened to your face? Did they notice they had a scratch on your face? Anybody?
Not really, but they noticed this, like.
What did you say about that?
I said I fell.
Okay. Did you say where?
Mm-hmm.
What did you say?
I said Gateway Mall Park.
Okay. Can you just tell us what this girl looked like? Was she a black girl, Chinese girl, Spanish girl, white girl? Do you remember?
She looked white.
Okay. About how big was she?
About 5'4", 5'3", I guess.
Heavy, slim, medium?
Kind of look medium.
Okay.
Had you ever seen her before?
No.
Did you ever go back to that same park, Spring Creek Park, after August 2nd, after this date?
Mm-mm.
Never? Okay.
Chanel, after her face is in the water and you pick her up and you drag her into the weeds, does she move at all at that point or make any more noises?
Mm-mm.
No? At what point did she stop moving and making any sounds?
Just when she was under the water.
Under the water?
Mm-hmm.
Like as she was under the water or right before you put her in?
As she was under the water.
Were you holding her under the water?
At that point, no. I was too busy cleaning off the blood from my hand.
Okay. Was she still moving while you were strangling her around the neck?
She was moving like quite a little bit, yeah.
Is that when she scratched your face?
No, it was when I was hitting.
When you were hitting her, she scratched your face?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
When you were hitting her, were you standing over her or were you like sitting on her chest or how were you positioned when you were hitting her?
Like I was on top.
But were you standing on top or were your knees on the ground? Were you were you low or were you standing up on your feet?
Like it was kind of like between, like in the middle. Between the middle of standing and crouching on the floor.
Crouching like a catcher in baseball or with your knees on the ground?
It's more like a one with the baseball.
Like a catcher in baseball? Did you ever hit it with anything or you hit it with your hands?
Just the hands.
Okay. Oh, and all the punches were to her face, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said it was with both your hands?
Mm-hmm.
You only got the injury to the one hand?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say you use that hand more?
Yeah, it's more like it on that hand, yeah.
Or you're righty?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did you notice whether she suffered any injuries as a result of the punches?
Just a broken tooth.
That's it? Do you remember, could you see if she was bleeding or not, or black,
Not really
swollen?
checked.
You didn't check? Okay.
Did she say anything to you? Was she able to, other than maybe if she screamed, was she able to communicate at all? Say any words, any sentences?
Mm-hmm.
Did you say anything to her while it's happening?
Mm-hmm.
And you were angry because of what happened in your neighborhood?
Yes.
Were you angry about what happened in Howard Beach?
No.
Did you have any friends or people you knew who lived in the neighborhood by Howard Beach?
No.
No?
No, I'm good.
Okay, the time
He
is...
was talking about,
I'm sorry.
he was talking about what you was talking about with him? Rest of what?
What?
Oh, what's that called again? Rest of what? You said it.
I said, did you have any friends in the area? You said no, right?
No, respiratory. Wait, it was something you said.
Subsequently, Lewis was charged with homicide and intimate violations amongst other offences. This marked the pivotal turning point in the case. The trial of Chanel Lewis revolved around the presentation of compelling evidence, particularly his DNA found under Karina Vetrano's fingernails. During his interrogation, which was played for the jurors, Lewis admitted to authorities that he had encountered Vetrano whilst he was in a bad mood that was provoked by a neighbour's loud music. He went on to confess that he became angry and attacked Karina. He said he hit her in the face and mouth. However, Lewis's defense lawyers contended that his confession had been coerced. They also raised concerns about the potential tainting of the crime scene by the victim's father. When he discovered Karina's body, he lifted her up and hugged her. The trial was marked by intense deliberations, and on November 20th, 2018, after 14 hours, the jury reported their verdict. They were deadlocked. As a result, the judge declared a mistrial. This left the case in a state of uncertainty. The prosecutors promptly announced their intent to retry the case. They said that this legal battle was unresolved. Between that day and the start of Chanel Lewis's retrial, police worked to gather as much evidence as they could to ensure a new outcome. According to Lewis's mother, he looked disheveled and injured when he arrived home on the night of August 2nd. She added to say that his clothes were torn. Lewis had explained to her that he was mugged on the way home. The next morning, Lewis's father took him to the emergency room, looking for treatment for the scratches and cuts on his upper body. This was as well as a boxer's injury to his fist. A boxer's injury is normally a broken metacarpal on the little finger due to the impact of a punch. Evidence gathered from the doctor that treated Chanel revealed that his hand injury was likely the result of punching someone. Crucially, evidence also showed that Lewis's cell phone placed him in the park at the time of the homicide. His device also contained downloaded images of the crime scene and internet searches about second chances. At the start of the second trial in March of 2019, this new evidence was presented along with the existing evidence from the previous trial. However, in response, the defense had their own thoughts on this evidence. The defense lawyer argued for reasonable doubt. They emphasized the absence of fingerprints or hair and pointed out the need for more precise DNA evidence. In all actuality, it was possible that Chanel's DNA on Karina could have been a result of secondary transference. This meant that Chanel's DNA could have been transferred onto Karina through the fact that both of them touched the same object. The defense contended that the investigation by the police was sloppy. They said that they failed to thoroughly check for evidence. Additionally, they continued to assert that Chanel was coerced into his confession. They noted that many of his statements were inconsistent with the actual evidence. He stated that the cause of Karina's passing was the fact that she had drowned, face down in a puddle, when the evidence showed that she was actively strangled. Chanel also seemed confused and unclear at times. This raised suspicions on the part of the defense as to whether his confession was genuine. They raised concerns about tunnel vision clouding their judgment, latching onto Chanel as the culprit out of desperation to finally close the case. On March 28, 2019, as both the defense and prosecutors rested their cases, a surprising turn of events unfolded. An anonymous letter was sent to the defense team. This alleged that prosecutors had withheld potentially exculpatory material. Exculpatory material refers to evidence or information that is favourable for the defendant in a criminal case. Evidence that shows their innocence or casts doubt on their guilt. This evidence can include facts, documents, witness statements, or any information that would help exonerate the accused. It is the legal and ethical duty of the prosecutors to provide this material to the defense. This is part of their obligation to ensure a fair trial. Failure to disclose this information can be a violation of a defendant's rights, and therefore this may lead to the overturning of a conviction. The defense lawyers Julia Burke and Robert Moeller found a plain envelope with no return address in their office. The 3-page typed letter pointed attorneys to several meetings among investigators, meetings during the initial 2 weeks of the investigation. According to the unknown author, NYPD Deputy Chief Michael Kemper had stated on multiple occasions at these meetings that they were looking for 2 jacked-up white guys who are from Howard Beach, while Chanel Lewis was slight and African American. Additionally, the letters revealed that after Chanel Lewis's DNA was taken, one of the detectives reported back to Lieutenant John Russo saying, "He's not the perp. He's too puny and dim-witted." In response to this case-altering information, the defense planned to submit motions seeking a hearing to address the prosecution's alleged failure to disclose this, as well as even more damning exculpatory evidence. They also looked to challenge the New York Police Department's unconstitutional racial profiling throughout the investigation. On April 1, 2019, Queen's Supreme Court Justice Michael Aloise delivered significant rulings in the case. He denied all of the defense's motions to conduct a hearing about the allegations in this anonymous letter. Additionally, he dismissed the defense's request for a mistrial. Following these rulings, the closing arguments commenced. The jurors began deliberating at around 4 p.m. and, remarkably, they reached their verdicts by 9 p.m. Chanel Lewis was, this time, found guilty of first-degree homicide, of 2 counts of second-degree homicide, and of first-degree intimate violations. His sentencing was scheduled for April 17th, and under New York State's criminal law for first-degree homicide, Lewis faced a maximum penalty of life without the possibility of parole. However, on the same day, Chanel Lewis's attorneys filed a motion requesting an evidentiary hearing regarding allegations of juror misconduct. This motion led to the postponement of the sentencing, and the hearings related to these allegations were scheduled for April 22nd. The judge ultimately dismissed these claims and continued with the sentencing. When the day arrived, Justice Michael B. Aloise delivered a powerful sentence to Chanel Lewis. He told him that if he ever intended to atone for his crime, he would have to do so inside a prison cell. The courtroom was filled with tension as Lewis awaited his sentencing. Before the sentencing, Chanel heard heart-wrenching statements from Karina's father, from her mother and her 2 siblings. They remembered Karina as a bright light in their lives, and they emphasized the terror that she must have experienced in her final moments. The Vetrano family pleaded with Justice Aloise to impose the maximum sentence. They were also strongly critical of Lewis's defense team. When Chanel Lewis had the opportunity to speak, he declared his innocence and offered condolences to the Vetrano family. He continued to maintain that he did not commit the crime. Karina's older sister, Tana, directed harsh words towards Lewis. She described him as unremarkable and insignificant, wishing for him to live a life of darkness and fear. Philip, Karina's father, shared the profound impact of his daughter's loss to their family. He conveyed that they were living as though their lives had ended, with their faith in God and their belief in heaven being the only things preventing them from succumbing to their despair. Karina's mother disputed the defense's portrayal of Lewis as an emotionally challenged young man. She described him as a clever and remorseless criminal with an empty soul. Justice Aloise, echoing the religious sentiments expressed by the Vetrano family, believed that Karina now sat beside God. He urged Lewis to embrace the concept of redemption and second chances. This was a reference to the research found on his cell phone. Ultimately, Justice Aloise rejected the defense's plea for a lighter sentence, a plea based on Lewis's mental and emotional difficulties. Chanel Lewis, in his sentencing, met the consequences of his actions. He would serve life in prison with no chance of parole. According to Karina's writings, it's chaotic and unpredictable, but I do believe that on some days it's quite beautiful, in all its poetic little tragedies. Do you think the punishment fits the crime here? How do you feel about this case? What do you think could be done to avoid something like this happening again in the future? Please do let me know down in the comments. And if you appreciate what I'm doing here, please do hit that like button. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.